Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Grand Line. From a Dragon Egg to Strongest Evolution. Chapter 41. What? The mermaids took a step back in shock, more horrified than seeing Shien turned into a dragon. That woman is a sea monster. Go away, stay away from her. Son of Taboo, the legendary calamity, the deadly sea monster siren. Even Shien heard words like freaks in the crowd, but asked if he didn't understand. He looked at Neptune and others and asked, Miss Balian is so beautiful, how could she be a monster? Pretty. Not only other people, but even Balian herself couldn't help but look up at Shien, her eyes full of surprise. Mr. Shien, do you think I am beautiful? Not like a monster. Speaking of monsters, I think I am more like a monster than you, what do you think? Hina. Xena, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, nodded vigorously from the side. She said that her brother was such a weird dragon, she could accept it, not to mention that Balian was no different from a mermaid and a murloc in her eyes. That's because you are not a marine race, you don't understand at all. Balian said loudly. Don't make me laugh. Shien couldn't help interrupting at this moment. Why should I understand what your ocean races are like? As long as I think you are beautiful, that's enough. What they think or think, I don't care. Wow. Balian's eyes reddened, and she burst into tears. While the others looked at each other, the old king sighed and said, As you have seen, your lord, Balian is special, and I am ashamed to say that when I was young, I failed her and her mother and didn't want to wait. See them and make them forget me. But what I didn't expect was that her mother didn't tell me that she had a child in her womb because she hated me. Oh, Shien's expression moved slightly, as if he realized something. She is also a sea monster. Do not. The old king's eyes clearly showed a touch of fear, and he shook his head. Far more terrifying than the siren, she is a demon, my little daughter. Don't lie to me, how could the devil be a mermaid? Shien snorted and didn't believe that the monster that attacked him was a demon, because he clearly felt the other party's entity. The devil of the deep sea is what we call it, but in fact it is another child of mine. The old king's expression was very painful, and he seemed unwilling to mention these things, while Neptune looked dumbfounded. He felt like he had picked it up, and his father had hidden too much. Her name is Carol, and she is not as scary as you say. Balian couldn't help but yelled out at this moment, and then looked at Shien and said, Sorry, I lied to you. Carol is not a monster like you think, she is also autoerogene, just like me. I am because of a genetic mutation, and she is simply very sensitive to blood. What's the meaning? Shien wanted to be angry after knowing that he was deceived, but now he is still attracted by their words. To be precise, blood has an irresistible attraction to that monster. It is extremely sensitive to the smell of blood, and once it smells the breath of blood, it will be uncontrollable violent, and its posture is like a demon. Carol is not a demon. Even if you eat 10 murlocs, doesn't it count? The old king finally couldn't help but broke out, and shouted in a low voice, If it weren't because she couldn't control her power at all, how would I have expelled her? Let her live alone in the poor dark abyss. She is. But I ate the murloc. Hiss. Except for Shien and Hina, everyone else took a breath. For them, this behavior can be said to be very terrifying, just as terrifying as vampires and werewolves, in the eyes of humans, and vampires are also often regarded as a kind of demon. No, it wasn't Carol doing it. It was the other one, the guy who made her unable to control herself. There is a demon in her. Balian, my child. Believe me, there is only one Carol, and that demon is her true face. So, what kind of creature is Carol in your mouth? Shien roared out of anger, and their dispute stopped in an instant. She is. When Shien's voice fell, these people came back to their senses, as if the old king hadn't mentioned Carol's race from beginning to end. Father, Neptune couldn't help but stared at it, waiting for his answer. She is a megalodon, the ancestor of a mermaid. Megatooth. Balian suddenly said the name Megalodon, and Shien woke up in an instant. Megalodon, one of the once extinct marine overlords, feeds on whales and sea kings, and is the largest fish in the history of the ocean, and one of the largest and strongest predators in history. And Carol should be the last megalodon mermaid in the world. So, is this the true face of that deep-sea demon? Megatooth. No wonder the big mouth of the blood basin looks so familiar, and when Xian is hit in the back of his head, he can still feel a sharp tooth. If it is a megalodon, everything can be explained. Just like the type of sea kings contains fish. Not only fish, but also non-mammalian species such as highly venomous sea snakes, giant sea frogs, ancient sea turtles the size of an island, etc., can all belong to sea kings. Broadly speaking, megalodon sharks with extremely large size can also be considered as sea kings. A kind of sea kings. In addition, after a long period of time, most marine organisms, like terrestrial organisms, may gradually evolve into other species. Some ancient creatures are not extinct, but gradually evolved into new species, just like the birth of the murlocs. But Carol is a reversion phenomenon. She is the last megalodon, with an ancient and brutal bloodline, which is the so-called megalodon mermaid. However, the phenomenon of returning to ancestors is normal in the Fishmen Island. You can refer to Shirahoshi and shark. They are completely different races, but they were born by the same parents. That is because the ancestors have genes from other fish in the bloodline. Another example is Bai Lian, Carol's sister, who has a bloodline and a genetic mutation. Including Neptune's father, he is also the ancestral bloodline of extinct species, so the ancestry phenomenon is actually quite common in the Fishmen Island, and it is not uncommon. So the problem came. Since the phenomenon of returning to ancestors is not uncommon, why is it that only megalodons are regarded as demons? That's because megalodons are particularly sensitive to blood. Once they smell blood, they will involuntarily show their most violent side. This is the instinct of living creatures, hunting, devouring, endless hunger. But in the eyes of others, this is called blood rage. Just like Charlotte Linlin, she looked very well behaved when she was a child, and seemed harmless to humans and animals, but when she really ran away, schizophrenia, did she know who she was? Does she know what she is doing? When Carol smells blood, it will become exactly the same as Charlotte Linlin's schizophrenia. When she smelled the smell of blood and instantly transformed into a huge and terrifying predator, do you still think she is cute? No, at that time you will want to run away with great horror, and escape that devouring mouth. So, it is normal for mermaids and murlocs to fear megalodons. Moreover, megalodons are usually 20 meters long and weigh 40 tons. Their biting ability exceeds that of Tyrannosaurus rex. Great white sharks are as fragile as a small goldfish in front of it. Moreover, megalodons have no natural enemies in the ocean, and the reason for their extinction is starvation. Because they ate up all the creatures and caused their own genocide, this is the sorrow of the megalodon and the object that the Fishmen Island has to expel. Otherwise, if someone in the Fishmen Island is accidentally injured, everyone in the entire town will be killed. Eat up. And Carol knew this and was willing to take the initiative to leave the Fishmen Island and live forever in the dark bottom, never touching the light source. Remember what Hina said when he was spotted by a murloc soldier: it dare not come near here, because the hungry megalodon would instantly recall eating the murloc when he saw the light source. The painful memory of the time, and then will struggle to leave there and return to the dark sea. After all, Carol is a poor fellow. As for her human form, Xian hasn't seen her yet. Because when she was attacked, it was when she went violently, which was very terrifying. And the sister Bai Lian is so beautiful, no matter how ugly her sister can go there, she just lives in the dark for a long time, maybe she doesn't care about her appearance anymore. The above is the provisional information about the megalodon mermaid, Carol. What she really is like. Only after Xian sees it in person can we make a conclusion. The relationship between your marine race is really messy. The whale family gave birth to sharks, there are other fish species, and even upgraded ones. Xian sighed, and now finally found out the ins and outs of the matter. Humph. Xena Tyrannosaurus also gritted her teeth at this time, and finally knew the true face of the monster that attacked her. Mr. Xian, please don't hurt her. Seeing Xian's gloomy expression at this time, Bai Lian hurriedly interceded for her sister. She is not malicious, she is very kind. Do you know what the 3 major malignant tumors in this world are? Xian said to Bai Lian indifferently at this time: discrimination, arrogance, mother. Roar. Xena agreed. She seemed to be communicating with Bai Lian telepathically, translating her brother's words. Species discrimination and arrogance will cause the 2 races to fall apart. But the virgin will lead to 1 or more races. The extinction. If your sister can't control herself and can only wander around the Fishmen Island, it will be a threat to everyone, and it must be painful to her. After that, Hina also proudly said that their Tyrannosaurus rex knew how to keep the primordial ceratops in captivity, and the megalodon still ate towards extinction stupidly and would definitely starve to death. How come? Bai Lian shed tears in pain. At this time, the corners of her mouth trembled, and she knelt down in front of Xian, feeling bewildered. Ah! Old King Gansalu also shook his head sadly, as if he had made a decision. Master Xian, I am willing to accompany you to slay that demon, at least let Carloer die less painfully. Father, Neptune looked at him. Stupid son, if I die, you will be the king of the Fishmen Island. The old King Gansalu grinned, then handed the ancestral trident to Neptune, and said, this is the true sea god. The trident has the power to stir ocean currents. Your imitation can be lost. I won't let you down. Neptune cried and laughed, took the trident, and then said that he would work hard to protect the Fishmen Island. Soldiers, follow me. And many more. Just when Neptune was about to leave, Xian drank him and stared at him. Nipton, yes, if you have your own family in the next few decades. Especially if you have for a daughter, it is also a phenomenon of returning to ancestors or possessing special abilities. What would you do? Neptune was dumbfounded. He hesitated for a moment and said, I will protect her. No matter what she is my daughter. At least Neptune, unlike his father, said something like a human at this time. But, Xian turned around and asked, what if your daughter is a weapon that will destroy the world? No one knows why Xian asks this, but although Neptune's brain is not good, he also replied from the bottom of his heart at this time, different uses of power will result in different results, not necessarily all destruction. I believe if I really have a daughter one day, I will guide her correctly. How about this? Xian thought for a while and said, if someday, Sea Kings wants to break through the door of the Fishmen Island, want to break the Fishmen Island and take your daughter away. Just remember to contact me and I will help you. But the premise is that your daughter can only have one mentor, and that is me. Thanks, I will consider it. Neptune hesitated and nodded. Anyway, he felt that there was no wife yet, so let's talk about the future. Xian nodded, and at this moment Neptune hadn't realized that he had handed over his future daughter of Poseidon status to the pirate at this time. Others are also inexplicable. I don't understand why Xian suddenly discussed the future. Can he predict the future will not happen? Of course others are not clear. The purpose of Xian is to prevent the awakening of the fish princess from falling into the hands of other people. Otherwise, summon a large group of terrifying sea kings to attack yourself, then you can play. Because Xian found a monster called Leviathan in the Legendary Creatures illustration book. That guy's life value is about 1,000 times that of his current self. No other data is known, and it is definitely at the level of a world-class boss. There is a saying in the sea, that is to provoke anyone, but to provoke the Sea Kings, it is a dead end. But it doesn't matter, because maybe Xian in a few decades may have evolved to surpass the strength of the Sea Kings. Everyone, Xian looked up at the blue water outside the Fishmen Island, and said in a low voice, I will help you get rid of this deep-sea monster, but on the other hand, you have to send someone to help me pick up the boat and finish the coating. Send it to the entrance of New World. Don't worry, Master Xian. As long as the megalodon dies, let alone a ship, it will be fine to fish all the sunken ships, including the treasures that have sunk under the sea. Xian nodded, then narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. The battle has begun, run away, little shark, I will come to you soon. Clang, clang, the hammer kept hitting the steel spear, bursting out scoffing sparks, and gradually one huge harpoon was created. Suddenly, more and more people began to join this hunting operation. Nowadays, there are already more than 100 Murloc-sized teams, and they have begun to divide into small groups to go out to explore and search for news about the deep-sea demon. The other side, Tyrannosaurus Rex was lying near the huge hot furnace, watching intently at what the tall man in front of him was beating. Bang, bang, Xian is holding a heavy hammer in his right hand, hitting the black material in front of him one by one. Under the extreme high temperature, his wrist is also covered with small and dense scales. The fingers hold this hard to cut and process, exposing hard bones of spines. Bang, bang, Xian trimmed the black thorn expressionlessly, blowing a high-temperature breath from time to time, stimulating the blackthorn to produce special dragon attribute energy, and soon the blackthorn slowly formed the shape of a lance. The thing he wants to build is the legendary dragon spear, Cadmus. Cadmus, the spear of extinguishing dragons, is also called the reincarnation of Nirvana and the spear of death thorns. It can be called whatever its name. Cadmus is a dragon-slaying hero in Greek mythology. He used a spear to challenge a poisonous dragon hidden in the forest. The dragon's purple-red crown was gleaming, and his eyes were red, as if spraying a raging flame. The body is huge, with 3 faithful suns protruding from his mouth, like a trident, with 3 layers of sharp teeth lined up in his mouth. The warriors who once conquered it, each frightened blood coagulated and couldn't move. They were either entangled and strangled or killed by the breath of poison. After Cadmus heard about it, he decided to defeat the dragon himself. When he first encountered the poisonous dragon twisted its scaly body into a ball, then curled up and moved forward, holding its head high, looking down at Cadmus fiercely, and staring at him. Cadmus saw that his servant was dead, and was very angry, but no matter how he attacked, he couldn't hurt the dragon in the slightest. In desperation, Cadmus suddenly grabbed the spear in his hand and pierced the poisonous dragon with a hard thick skin and scaly shell. The spear tip penetrated deeply into the dragon. Internal organs. The dragon was in pain, turned his head violently, bit the spear on his back, and crushed it with his body, but the tip of the spear remained in his body, and the dragon was seriously injured. But because of this, Cadmus' behavior angered the dragon, and the dragon's throat swelled quickly, spewing poisonous foam, and attacked like an arrow. In the end, Cadmus fought more and more bravely. He saw the opportunity and jumped up to stab the dragon's neck. This stabbing was fierce and heavy, not only piercing the dragon's neck, but also into the back of the dragon. In a big oak tree, the dragon was nailed tightly to the tree, and the dragon was killed. But, in front of Xian, this root is polished from the hardened bone spurs of the black dragon. It has a strong destructive power and a destructive ability to cause dragon attribute damage to creatures, as well as a terrifying regeneration ability. It can be a weapon that can be further evolved due to continuous killing, but it has nothing to do with the story of the Greek hero Cadmus. But the reason for naming it, Cadmus, is not the "I kill myself" operation, but Xian compared the megalodon to a dragon, and he wanted to defeat the hero of that dragon. I have eaten countless fishes in my life, and I still have a fear of being eaten by fish. Xian looked at the dragon spear carefully, squinting his eyes slightly, as if saying to someone, in the terrifying unknown world, you may be such a fragile little being. In the eyes of some creatures, unbearable. Laugh. The sharp dark dragon spear pierced the steel plate in front of Xian mercilessly, and he pulled it out again, looked at the sharp blade, and then said, "When people are in fear, they will make people secrete a lot of adrenaline. But some creatures, they are tireless and fearless, after bleeding and injury, they will become more violent under the stimulation of pain. No one knows this better than I do. Feel." The dark black and dark purple dragon spear is 4 meters long and weighs 200 kilograms. It has a deterrent hockey and extremely terrifying lethality. Even if it stands in place, no one doubts its sharpness. This bone spur from the black dragon's body was stripped out by Xian. Although the process was painful, it only took a few more meals to recover. Demon fruit power has a characteristic, that is, if it has transformed or made something before it comes into contact with seawater or sea stone, then these characteristics will not disappear after contact with seawater. So, it's just that you can't use the ability in the sea. But if it is a weapon prepared in advance, there is no problem at all. Speaking of which, Xian turned her head and stood up, looking back. The majestic dragon-shaped armor full of hockey stood in front of him, the sharp texture of the wrist armor, the extremely hard chest dragon armor, the huge horn-like dragon helmet, full of hockey, in the reflection of the burning flame, the surface it seems to be covered with a thin metal-like coating. Dragon armor. Xian let out a low growl. At this time, the tall figure stood upright, his back gradually expanded as if something was about to be torn apart, extending out the huge black dragon wings that pierced through the clothes. Fit. Xian floated up. Under the waving of the dragon's wings, his figure resembled a human-shaped dragon. Starting from the hanging toes, black and purple rays of light were lingering, and the black horny black dragon armor quickly attached to his surface and followed closely. The calves, thighs, waist, chest, arms, and the last skull are all covered with dragon scale battle armor. Special evolution black dragon armor form. Om, the ghost-like pupils suddenly opened, and the terrifying figure slowly fell to the ground. The black armor covered with black stripes, with the shaking of the big wings behind him, slowly landed on the ground, making a boom. The vibrating sound. Chi-Chi. Under the jet-black full-faced dragon helmet, Xian's body is protected by layers of this absolutely defensive black dragon armor. Although you can't see the face inside, you can vaguely feel that Xian is showing hideousness. Smile. Kaka. With the clenching of the fist, the armor made a clicking sound, and then he held the spear of the dragon thorn that had just been built, and with a sudden wave, an invincible aura of invincibility spread everywhere. Little shark, your end is coming soon. Standing on a high place, overlooking the liquid metal flowing in the furnace, Xian lifted up heavy steps and moved closer to the past step by step. Click. He picked up the hot red molten iron in one hand, and then poured it directly on the surface of the armor, protecting the originally very strong dragon scales and coating it with a metal coat again. Only the last step is left. The black dragon armor completely isolates the sea water, but the oxygen is also isolated. The oxygen cylinder is too expensive to build, and I am afraid it is not useful. If you hold your breath, you can, but considering that the target swims very fast in the sea, it is not suitable long-distance battle. Therefore, Xian plans to evolve abilities first and unlock underwater breathing. However, considering that it cannot directly touch the sea water, I use the black dragon armor of the living body to start to absorb and store the oxygen in the water, and then transport it to my blood through the internal tentacles like a needle-like object to achieve permanent presence. The ability to survive underwater. It can be said. The modern knowledge and memory of Xian's past life has made his understanding and development of devil fruit reach an astonishing height. Only in this way can this special evolution be unlocked. If you change to someone else, I'm afraid you don't even know what the submarine suit or oxygen cylinder is. This is how Xian overcomes underwater swimming, the so-called dragon armor form. Wow, Hina the Tyrannosaurus was about to fall asleep on her stomach, as if seeing a flash of light in front of her eyes, and then Xian transformed into an armored dragon knight. She appeared on the stage with dazzling majesty and brightened her eyes. Those black scales that repeatedly regenerate and harden cover the whole body, and the abnormally developed scales converge in plural, and finally merge into armor from multiple ones, and isolate the seawater and oxygen. The combat power of the human form is greatly enhanced, but the dragon form cannot be used, and the half-dragon form can be used. The so-called half-dragon transformation is the transformation of parts, such as dragon wings, dragon claws, dragon fists, etc., but the armor form is already fully equipped, and there is no need to take the initiative to transform again. But, Xian's dragon wings are not shrunk into the armor, but are protected by a metal coat alone to increase power. After all, if you want to move at high speed in the sea, it is difficult to move in a heavy armor without jet or nuclear power. No, you can't swim at all. So cool. Mecha and Gundam are more than just men's romance. Even Hina, the Tyrannosaurus sister who had been with Xian for a long time, looked forward with bright eyes and began to roar like a coquettish. Give me the whole one too. Hina looked at Haki's extraordinary black dragon armor, and wanted to be exactly the same. After all, Xian's things are hers, and she would involuntarily imitate them. Forget it, this hunting operation is not suitable for large-scale participation. If it is on land, it is nothing, but here is 10,000 meters of deep sea. Hearing this, Hina suddenly had a psychological shadow and remembered the process of being chased by a megalodon. Roar, but Hina was still unhappy. It's very scary in the cold deep sea. Those sea monsters have mouths that look like chrysanthemums, with sharp spiral teeth inside, shredding enemies like a meat grinder. Those huge tentacles it makes you unable to escape, unable to resist, and even unable to breathe. Seeing his younger sister's increasingly scared expression, Xian smiled wickedly. In the suffocating darkness, the megalodon will like to attack those swimming enemies. It can burst out extremely quickly within a short distance. Speed, attack from below the prey. When hunting a large prey, the megalodon may first attack its tail or limbs, causing it to lose the ability to swim, and then destroy it. Woohoo, stop talking. Hina shook her head and backed away, never going to the deep sea again. However, for the remaining materials, I can consider doing some protection for you. Xian approached at this time and carefully looked at her sister's curvaceous figure. Forget it, there is nothing good about a dragon. From the essence of Tyrannosaurus, the thick skin mainly located at the bottom of the neck is vulnerable to injury, and then the abdomen on both sides, as well as the short forelimbs that are not lethal and can only shred the dead prey. Xian's transformation plan is to use armor to protect part of the body of the Tyrannosaurus rex from the center back of the shoulders and the front end of the tail. It is not so much protection, as it is to facilitate movement and add light defense. Then there is the head, like a triangular dragon-shaped helmet that protects the eyes and nose, as well as the entire head, so that you don't have to worry about fatal headshots and locked throats. Mecha Tyrannosaurus Rex looks particularly technical, but a bit awkward. Moreover, Hina's body evolution seems to be reaching a bottleneck. Her body size is almost reaching an astonishing 40-meter length. Xian feels that she will soon usher in an evolution, which is likely to be a big evolution that transcends the constraints of descent factors. P.S. Special forms are not considered evolutions in the true sense. They are equivalent to suits and weapons made by Xian's black thorns, dragon scales and other materials. Similar to human nails and hair, it will regenerate soon. And this armor can be worn by other people, but there are restrictions, because the armor is alive, where for a long time, the weak may be assimilated into a dragon-shaped monster. Cell division assimilation. Only Xian can perfectly control nonsense as part of his body. In addition, there are other good-looking armor styles that can be recommended. This one can be evolved at will, equivalent to the appearance of the skin, and will not be affected. These raised spiny scales can make you more aggressive and wild, but don't rely too much on these auxiliary equipment, which will affect your growth rate. Xian is very worried that the sloughed cells are highly corrosive, and start to multiply and divide on Xena at an amazing speed, and what adverse effects will it cause? Because these scales contain a large amount of high-purity energy, they will survive for a while after they fall off. And if there is a host, it will continue to consume the nutrients of the host to maintain self-life. If they use Hina's body as a host for long-term transformation and assimilation, it will definitely become very troublesome. So, Xian particularly controlled the coverage of the area, exposing as much of the Tyrannosaurus skin as possible to avoid allergies, and even strictly instructed Hina to take off these biological armors when sleeping and resting. Certainly, even if Hina is really infected by dragon attribute cells, Xian can also deal with these breeding individuals. After all, this is his power. Even if the cells fall off, they still tend to instinctively obey the control of the mother. Thoroughly master. Also, regarding weapons. In fact, in addition to the dragon spear, Cadmus, Xian still has a giant sword embryo that has not been created. But Xian usually fights in dragon form, and doesn't like to use weapons. That will affect his proficiency in dragon form and the training of combat skills. What's more, the sharp teeth and claws of the black dragon are much stronger than those of swords. But if you have to use weapons, you will use different weapons for different situations, such as the use of the dragon spear Cadmus in the sea, the great sword on the land, and the bow or other types of weapons in the sky. Weapons will grow larger with changes in body size. The principle is that these biological weapons will become huge by injecting pure and extremely dragon attribute energy into them. So the legendary 40-meter-long sword is not impossible. But usually Xian is in dragon form when fighting. Only in special circumstances will this weapon be used as an auxiliary attack, such as hunting marine creatures. Outside the furnace room. No, it's not good. When Xian and his sister were talking about the performance and abilities of the armor, a female mermaid ran from outside in horror and shouted, and at the same time looked at Xian in fear, her face full of anxiety. Xian, who was in the form of a dragon knight, turned his head and looked at this petite mermaid woman. Although he didn't have any malice, the instinctive fear made her back again and again. Sorry, the young female mermaid became frightened, looked at this tall human, and swallowed again when she reached her throat. What's wrong? Are you afraid that I will eat you? Glancing at the mermaid lady who stared at her blankly, Xian said with certainty, at least I don't think your physique can fill my stomach, and I don't eat people. Yes, is it? Miss Mermaid smiled bitterly, then thought of something, and hurriedly said, right. You are Mr. Xian, right? It's me, what's the matter? Xian moved the armor on his wrist, making some adjustments to his flexibility, and said casually, looking at how anxious you are, it shouldn't be the situation in Dragon Palace City. Could it be that the shark appeared? No, even if it is. If the shark appears, you shouldn't send non-combatants like you to inform me. No, it's Balian. She was captured by the pirate. Here. Xian stopped the movement of his hands. Without any sluggishness, he stood up. Sir, when Miss Mermaid wondered, Xian put his hand on her waist. Before the mermaid could react, she was wrapped around her slender waist with a hand, and then her vision suddenly widened. She was placed on the man's shoulder, and she turned her head in panic to look at the man. Profile. First, sir. Where is she? Xian stood up immediately. At this time, he took up the Dragon Slayer spear Cadmus with no expression and strode forward. Coral Hill. She lives in Coral Hill, southeast of the Fishmen Island, and several other little sisters were arrested. Miss Mermaid suddenly recovered from looking at the man's profile in a daze, and hurriedly said the situation. Got it. Hina, open the way. The man's low voice fell, and the Tyrannosaurus, who had been silent for a long time, finally stood up. His tall body rushed out of the furnace room, and reached the mermaid street with an earthquake-like pace. Immediately after, roar, a huge dragon roar resounded throughout the mermaid street, and the Tyrannosaurus queen who looked up and screamed made a long roar like thunder. For a moment, all the Murlocs and merfolk retreated to their homes in horror, letting the original people come. The street where people go becomes empty in the next second. Crack, click, in the sound of the shaking of the armor, Xian sat expertly on the back of the Tyrannosaurus with black dragon armor. At this time, he was like a real dragon knight, possessing an extraordinary haki, a very oppressive sense of deterrence. Boom! With the sound of huge footsteps, riding a giant beast named Tyrannosaurus Rex, a golden and red cloak and a jet-black figure broke into the street in an instant. The strong dragon wrist gripped the heavy dragon spear. Cadmus revolved and swept and crushed the obstacles in front of him mercilessly. The heavy feet of his Tyrannosaurus stepped on the stone slab and aroused clank sounds, and the terrifying vigor caused everything around him to be lifted out. Why? The mermaid sitting on Xian's shoulders seemed to be shocked by his haughty behavior. She couldn't help looking at the clear street a little lostly, and muttered, Hakurin, is she important to you? Why do you ask? Xian's sharp gaze scanned the surroundings, and at this moment, he signaled Hina to head towards Coral Hill, and rushed to the beach where they arrived when they were killed. Because the replies I asked other people to get were to let the soldiers of Dragon Palace City help as soon as possible, but no one volunteered to save them, and even called Bai Lian a sea monster. Miss Mermaid's eyes gradually calmed down. What she didn't expect was that when she was really killed, the person who saved them without a word was a human who usually looked terrifying. And those mermaids who are delicate and handsome, when encountering danger, they will only flee one by one in panic, and they don't dare to challenge the pirates. She is not important, but she saved my life. Drinking low, Xian broke into the vicinity of Coral Hill, holding the sharp dragon-killing spear tightly in his hand. He raised the dark golden sharp eyes and swept everything on the street. He was about 10 meters tall and the Tyrannosaurus was about 8 meters tall. He was looking down from a higher angle of view. Look, that's their ship. Suddenly, Miss Mermaid pointed to a ship with a skull and pirate flag and shouted, and Xian also spotted the ship's trail. People are not there. Xian's observation haki swept away, and instantly found that there was no one inside the ship, which seemed to have taken the hostages to other places. How come? Miss Mermaid became anxious, her eyes filled with worry, and she began to look around to find her target. I ask you, are you familiar with Bai Lian? Xian, riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex, is very calm at this time. A kind mermaid like Balian will definitely save some innocent people who are in trouble, no matter whether the opponent is good or bad. Therefore, she would inevitably meet some bad guys, so Xian didn't seem too surprised when she heard that Bai Lian was captured by the pirates, but felt that it happened too suddenly. I have known Bai Lian for more than 10 years. She always didn't like to be in contact with others, and everyone excluded her. But Bai Lian is really a very kind person. She is also very beautiful and beautiful. As a mermaid, I am a bit ashamed. Before she knew it, Miss Mermaid seemed to recall the past. She secretly looked at Xian's expression like introducing herself. My name is Irene and I live in an apartment in Coral Hill. I didn't ask you about this. Do you have anything to carry Balian with you? Xian interrupted the mermaid Irene and made the other person pouted a little unhappy, but after hearing Bai Lian, she immediately came back to her senses. Yes. Bai Lian sometimes goes shopping with me, she has the clothes she wore. Take me to find that dress. Xian said, and then set off to the mermaid Irene's apartment nearby, asking her to find the clothes quickly. Aren't we going to save them? Why do we need these things? Although the mermaid Irene didn't quite understand, he still took Bai Lian's clothes and handed them to Xian. Sniff. Xian picked up his clothes and put it on the tip of his nose, smelling it, and then narrowed his eyes slightly. Ah. Sir, what are you? Irene looked at the tall man in front of her in amazement, what he was doing, but she didn't dare to say anything, she always felt very weird. Found it. Xian suddenly said something inexplicable. Maybe in other people's perspective, Xian looks like an idiot, but in Xian's perspective it is completely different. In the air, there are more than 300 different smells, and one of the brightest colors matches the smell of white lotus, so Xian locked this aura and shielded all the other auras so that the next scene appeared in his perspective. I saw a clear footprint on the street. Of course, only Xian can see these. He now only sees this breath master's course of action in the past not long ago, and wherever she has been, what she has come into contact with. Anything as long as it leaves a breath, it will be temporarily recorded in the environment. Target locked. Odor tracking. With a slight movement in his mind, Xian remembered the route in his mind, and then judged the direction where the white lotus finally disappeared, where the footsteps were mixed with the stench of the pirates. If the color of the white lotus's breath is blue and white, then those the pirate is the tar-like black that is clearly visible. Hina, catch up. They haven't walked far. The last breath disappeared 10 minutes ago, and Xian suddenly seemed to know something. They may catch mermaids on the Fishmen Island, and then sell them to land as slaves with another slave boat. This is the usual style of the dark world. Usually pirates just confuse their sight. Those who seem to be legal and have the transport ship of the pass as the real culprit. Roar. In an instant, Tyrannosaurus's soles lightly tapped, jumped into the high coral reef, and began to run quickly. Hina is a dragon who knows how to see, hear, and armament hockey. In the process of training, her movement speed and dexterity talents were also full. When she ran, she was really chasing the wind, sprinting hundreds of meters per second. The wind pressure generated is afraid that most people can't bear it. The mermaid Irene could hardly open her eyes at this time, and hugged the dragon knight Xian's neck tightly. After realizing that she could not withstand the speed of sound, Xian also thoughtfully helped her to block the strong wind with her hands to prevent her from being blown away. Go out. Boom 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 boom. The earth shook suddenly, and the Tyrannosaurus uplifted its entire body. Under the stunned gaze of many murlocs, a huge black shadow in the sky flashed by, and a huge dragon-like monster passed over their heads. Boom. Leaping up, Hina, who had crossed the entire street, fell to the ground, sliding and flicking. With the help of huge inertia and strength, she started a two-stage sprint. The whole body sprinted like a vigorous raptor, with extremely high speed. Fast can be called the strongest short-distance burst. Even Xian can only reach the highest speed when it is in flight, but he can't run Xena in a short sprint on land. Only when using the dragon wing to sprint, can he catch up with Hina's figure. This hasn't changed since childhood. Xian knew that Hina's sudden burst of speed was unparalleled when he was hide and seek before. What happened? Have there been an earthquake? However, just when Hina was sprinting with Tyrannosaurus, speeding hundreds of meters per second. Beside a camouflage ship near the port of the Fishmen Island, pirates and slave merchants guarded cages that were tightly closed and used to confuse the Murloc soldiers. The cages were covered with black cloth, making it difficult to see what was inside. Hey, stop! The horrified Murloc soldiers hurriedly stopped the Tyrannosaur's movements, but Hina didn't care about him, and the figure quickly passed over the soldiers' heads, and a terrifying storm was set off in an instant, and the entire team of Murlocs the soldiers blew out, screaming and fell to the ground in the distance. Right here, Xian, who was drinking low, immediately signaled Hina to slow down and pulled out the sharp dragon spear behind her. He raised his eyelids and looked down at the stunned pirates and slave merchants in front of him, as he slowly approached the Tyrannosaurus Xena. Who are you, you? Dragon Knight. The captain of the pirate watched vigilantly at the terrifying existence on the back of the Tyrannosaurus. The opponent slowly turned his head. On the burly and tall body like a dragon, the helmet resembled the horns of a magic dragon, and his shoulders had symmetrical bones connected to the dragon's head. The armor was full of deep pitch black, and a long tail that was sharp and vigorous like a dragon's tail swayed behind him. "Is that you?" The dragon knight riding a Tyrannosaurus, his eyes lit up with a deep and sharp golden light, and the muscles behind him collided in an instant, and the huge wings like dragon wings slowly opened. Boom! From the sharp claws he wielded, a terrifying sword aura that smashed the earth burst out, and the pirates dodged in horror. At the same time, the camouflage ship and the earth behind them showed hideous and terrifying claw marks. Roar-ang! Hina the Tyrannosaurus roared, and the dragon knight on his back slowly lifted into the air under the flapping of the big wings. You fellow, who are you? Why attack us? Many people have not seen Xian, but looking at this one, it looks terrifying, like a dragon and a demon, and it is full of blood like powerful power, and feels trembling in body and mind. That dragon, I got it. Suddenly a pirate recognized Hina. At this time, he looked at the demon-like tall figure and said in horror, He is the evil dragon Xian who has been rewarded with a reward of 300 million berry. 300 million. Did I increase the price? Xian didn't know that when he came to the Fishmen Island, the incident at Sabayati Archipelago spread out and was raised with a reward. Evil dragon Xian, you are also a pirate, I think we should have no conflicts. At this time, the man who looked like the captain took a deep breath and said that everyone is a pirate, there is no need to be so hostile, and said, if you are willing to cooperate with us, we will give you half of the dividend. How much is half? Xian asked. Half is. The pirate captain was happy in his heart, thinking that Xian was willing to cooperate with them, but before he could finish, the whole person was covered by a beam of light, and then suddenly disappeared. His flesh and blood were melted by the scorching heat and disappeared on the spot. There was a smell of ashes and burnt in the air. Captain, such a frightening scene scared everyone back. At the same time, some people hadn't even recovered. The captain was cremated in less than a second, which is too fast. Sneeze. I saw that Xian's raised hand hadn't been put down yet. The light just emitted from his palm. As a weakened version of the black dragon's breath, it is extremely efficient to wipe out some single enemies, because only people who have observation haki and react very fast to avoid it. If you resist, you must have a high level of demon fruit power or armament haki. Like the captain just now, it seems that there is less than 100 million rewards, and it is normal to be cremated on the spot. Half. Xian's mouth under the helmet slightly raised at this time, and said coldly, half means, I want to kill half of you. In an instant, in the horrible tone, Xian's fingers touched the dragon slayer spear, and it began to shine like a mythical rune, and it was clearly visible that some runes were engraved on the spear. Wrote, the wind is surging and the thunder is rushing. Close hollow corner bracket. The stunned dragon roars, bleeding and gurgling. Close hollow corner bracket. He who is stained with iron and blood runs through the scales of the dragon, and the spear of extinguishing the dragon, Cadmus. Close hollow corner bracket. When the finger touched the rune, the spear of extinguishing dragon seemed to come alive, floating in the air with radiance, shining with dazzling light, and at the same time the roar of the dragon's roar sounded, exuding a strong killing aura. This weapon has a characteristic, that is, it is more greedy, and it is considered to have inherited my character. The black dragon knight tilted his head, the skull of a dragon on his shoulders, and his eye sockets lit up, as if thinking. He walked forward and walked towards the pirates who were frightened by fear. Is it a human or a demon? There were bursts of sharp and cold low laughter in the air. The black dragon, black armor, and flowing black cloak, in front of everything that was dark, the dragon knight spoke. I won't kill you all, I need you to use as a bait to draw out that monster. However, the bait can't be too much. So I will reap the lives of some people properly now, start praying. Xian's voice was like a cold wind in the night, with pressure on his face, making him look extraordinarily horrible. Swish. The black light in the air vibrated violently, and Xian, who flickered in the crowd at an extremely fast speed, stood with his back facing the pirate, holding a bloody dragon spear in his hand, with a solemn expression and golden eye pupils, revealing a serious look. Puff, puff, the pirates with hollow eyes fell to the ground one after another. There were more than 20 celebrities. In an instant, there were only a dozen people still standing on the spot. They were terrified. It seemed that their inner prayers had an effect. At this time, they knelt on the ground. Tears streamed and cried to Xian to let them go. Why, he only has 300 million bounty, but he is even more terrifying than the 800 million bounty golden lion. The eyeballs of some pirates trembled slightly, which seemed to be unbelievable. Usually the bounty is used to measure the level of a pirate's strength, but the combat power of this person in front of them obviously exceeds the 300 million bounty. Maybe, I am a good person. The Black Dragon Knight turned his head and threw away the blood from the tip of the spear. The life energy of the pirates who had just been killed by him was absorbed by this magic spear, which was used to strengthen it and the nutrients of evolution. What? In the center of the blank area, Irene the mermaid seemed unconscious, but when she recovered, she suddenly screamed at the bloody scene, and then kept vomiting. You guys, clean up the ground, and then tie yourself up. If I see someone daring to run, it will be more than just being killed. Xian's horror is shown in front of the pirates, and he is a pirate himself, and he still has some prestige among the pirates. This group of pirates and slave traders are obviously not real desperados, otherwise they will not be limited to catching mermaid slaves instead of grabbing ships. It's too late, it's almost time. When Xian looked over, the pirates and slave traders immediately began to lift the corpse and throw it into the warehouse, and then began to clear the ground, and one after another, they tied the person in front of them. His hands, put on anklets, were strung by a steel chain into a long line, waiting in line for Xian to send off. Big, sir, what do you plan to do with us? Someone couldn't stand the horrible atmosphere, and asked nervously. Don't worry, I won't kill you for the time being, but it's up to you to survive. What's the meaning? Meaning, you have to be bait to lure a shark into the bait. If you survive by chance, then I will set you free. Under the closed helmet, Xian showed a devilish smile, because he knew that even if these people were given freedom, they would not be able to live in the 10,000-meter deep sea unless they could breathe underwater like him. Ah, shark bait. The pirates widened their eyes in despair. They had known it for a long time, and the half of the people who had just been killed might not have been them. But it's too late now, and they regret that they can't escape even if they want to. Click. Xian pulled the chains and tied them to the coral tree beside them. Sitting in a row, a group of people looked at the front hard, slowly waiting for death. After dealing with them, Xian came to the cage. Wow! Suddenly lifted the dark curtain, Xian saw that several young fish with their mouths sealed and tied hands were trapped in the cage. At this time, they closed their eyes tightly, and after gradually adapting to the strong light, they stared. Da Innocent's eyes full of fear looked at him, and tears couldn't stop streaming down. Woo! They could not make a sound when their mouths were sealed, but to Irene's surprise, Xian's eyes didn't stay on these mermaid girls for too long, and they didn't even intend to rescue them at all. Walked in the direction of another steel cage. Wow! Then he lifted the second cage. Xian glanced around, looked away from the mermaids, and then walked towards the third cage. Mr. Xian, why don't you save them? The mermaid Irene couldn't help asking. They were very pitiful. They are not Balian. Xian's words are instantly speechless. Because they are not the goal, even if he is dead, it has nothing to do with him. This indifferent attitude makes people feel very uncomfortable. It makes it impossible to judge whether he is good or bad. Sorry to keep you waiting. When the last black cloth was torn apart, Xian finally saw the creature with half-closed eyes that was completely different from the other mermaid girls. The beautiful side of the sea monster siren appeared in his eyes, as well as the smooth skin and light silver hair, both show her identity. Sister Balian. The mermaid Irene also approached in surprise, grabbing the cage and looking at the female inside. Irene. Bai Lian opened her eyes slightly. When she saw Xian, she was taken aback and smiled bitterly. Mr. Xian, why are you? What do you mean by me? It seems like someone will come to rescue you. I went to ask him for help. Irene said with a smile at this time. If you hadn't told me about Mr. Xian, I'm afraid I might not be able to find him. Okay, let's come out first. At this time, Xian's hand grabbed the steel and burst out with extremely powerful force. The steel bar was twisted in an instant, and the thick metal was directly bent and removed along with the top. Boom! The top that was damaged by the violence flew out and hit the ground heavily. This extraordinary power once again stared at other people. Now that we are both cleared, I don't owe you anything. Xian looked directly into the eyes of the sea monster Bai Lian. After speaking, he stood up and walked in the direction of Xena, holding the chains that bound the pirates in his hands. Mr. Xian, are you leaving now? The mermaid Irene looked here in astonishment, and hurriedly shouted, are you going to leave us alone? Are these sisters not saved? The key is on the ground, look for it yourself. With that, Xian left without looking back. The mermaid Irene with a bewildered face and the mermaid Baron with a wry smile were left behind, as well as the mermaid girls who stared blankly at the tall physique of the Dragon Knight and the figure of the Tyrannosaurus Haki. Xian is a principled person. He will not take the initiative to help others, nor will he ask others to help himself. But if someone really helped himself, then he would find a way to pay off all this. Heroes save beauty. Do not. It's just paying off the debt. Tom. On Murloc Street, a chubby young man shook his slightly strong arm and banged on something, constantly being called by his name. Who? Didn't you see that I was busy? The guy called Tom is a Murloc. He is busy with the Sea Train project that will shock the Grand Line in the future, and is buried in it at this time. Tom, don't mess with your rags, come here. What's the matter? Tiss. Tom was dissatisfied and stopped his movements. He had known that he would not return to the Fishmen Island. It would be better to open a shipyard in the capital of Seven Waters. You help me see, am I getting fat again? Follow closely. What appeared in Tom's eyes was a blonde with a single ponytail and a black dress with a huge breast. Unlike Tom's fat body, this beauty also has the horns of a murloc, but it is even larger, like an exoskeleton, and there is a carapace with spikes on the back, which looks like Mario's villain, Princess Cuba G. You are not called fat, but plump. Okay, let's not talk about it, I'm going to build a ship. Tom sighed. He was helpless for this big-minded sister. Men must have confidence and love for the boats they build, and women and everything are floating clouds outside. Shipbuilding. Speaking of it, there seems to be a strange guy recruiting boatmen on the Fishmen Island. Tiss seemed to be groaning, and then said to Tom, I heard that the man was paid quite high, and he was still a tall and mighty handsome man. It's a pity that he is said to be a pirate. Pirate, Tom snorted without looking back. I don't like pirates, maybe you can ask Dan, maybe he will be interested. Dan, forget it. Tiss showed a disgusting expression. She pretended to say, Dana boy, he woke up early this morning, he pinched his nose and said, sister, you have become fat again, as if you weighed more than 600 kilograms. Come on, I'm so angry. What can I do? Who makes me grow so tall? That's because you, old sister, are the dragon turtle mermaid who returned to our ancestors. Tom shrugged. He is about 4 meters tall and powerful enough to lift a boat with one hand. But Sister Tess, who is 6.8 meters tall, is equally powerful. She can lift a boat with one hand, but her height and weight are proportional. The weight that looks exaggerated is actually very uneven. And the Dan in their mouth was the younger brother of Tyson Tom, a wolf-fish mermaid, a boatman and a researcher in the sea forest, relatively thin, only over 2 meters in size. Hey, forget it, I'm going out first. Tom, you continue to work hard to build your so-called sea train. Stupid. Bon voyage. Tom shook his head. How do these people who don't understand his ideals know what a great project the sea train is? To be honest, in the big family of the Fishmen Island, the height of 6 meters can only be regarded as medium. Usually the shark merman is of this size, and the whale mermaid may be larger. Shirahoshi, you are all too small. Why are there no murlocs? That's because murlocs are generally shorter, and mermaids are much taller, handsome, and much more beautiful than murlocs, which seems to be an innate genetic advantage. However, murlocs have an advantage, that is, they can survive on land, and mermaids have inconvenient movements on land and are not as powerful as murlocs. Another thing is that mermaids can only evolve legs when they reach adulthood at the age of 30, but male mermaids can't, only female mermaids can. The other side. La la la. Ties hummed, shook her head and shook her golden single ponytail, and walked out with the basket on her back. The raised tiger teeth at the corners of her lips looked very cute, and her rich and colorful figure was very conspicuous no matter where she went, provoking many opposite genders. Gaze. Wow, it's dessert. Aha, the newly baked seaweed bread is delicious, aha, and jam. Tis sang and bought some daily food, donuts, milkshakes, sweets, etc. in the pedestrian hawking places on the street. It is well known that the desserts of the Fishmen Island are delicious and delicious even for the future BIGMOM. And know how delicious it is. What to do? If you buy too much, you will get fat. But I really want to eat. Tis seemed to be tangled. At this time, the two breads in her hand were tangled around. The one on the left was low fat and low sugar, but the one on the right was more delicious and tasted better. They are coming. At this moment, a notification sounded on the street. The fish people's complexion changed suddenly, and they began to pack things in a panic, preparing to close their stalls. Hey, what's the matter? I haven't paid for it yet. Tis watched the boss suddenly turned around and ran away, thinking that something major had happened, and staring at her surroundings in shock. Who is here? No more money. You go quickly too, they will leave by themselves after they eat. They will show up at this spot every day, and be careful of getting caught. The Murloc, who looked like a sea bream, ran in horror and said, but at this moment, Tice stared at the two breads in her hand, followed by her body stiff, and noticed that there seemed to be something huge behind her. The creature was approaching, and the breathing of that creature was heavy, and the sound of footsteps caused the ground to vibrate slightly. It was not difficult to imagine that it was a huge creature. Ah! The voice stuck in her throat, and the terrified Tis couldn't call it out. She didn't dare to look back, only to find a terrifying dragon-shaped shadow covering the top of her head, and slowly walked over. It's dead now. Tis had no blood on her face, and she shivered at this moment, and her heart was plunged into incomparable confusion. I am so fat, and I will definitely be eaten. Could it be the monster that appeared on the Fishmen Island not long ago? It's over. It's over. However, 10 seconds later, Tis stood motionless on the spot. The huge creature behind it seemed to ignore her, but was rummaged for something, and ate the overlord meal at the food street stall. Hey, where are you standing? Suddenly a clear male voice sounded. Tis turned her head in horror, and then saw it, a tall and handsome man with a donut in his hand, and threw it into his mouth, looking down at herself condescendingly, his eyes full of doubts. Wow! What followed was the head of a Tyrannosaurus. Tis was taken aback. Everyone fell backwards, and the bamboo basket in his hand was thrown into the air. Careful! Suddenly a strong and warm big hand grabbed her wrist, and the handsome tall man, Tis's brain made up, she didn't even see what this person looked like, pulled her into his arms. With the other hand I caught the bamboo basket and dessert, and then handed it over. Your things. Finished. The man turned around, walked to other stalls, and said, if you want to eat, you can take it yourself. Tomorrow they will settle the list by themselves, and then I will give them the money. Really, I don't know where the courage came from, but the blonde and single ponytail Tis raised her head and whispered, floss pork. Is there any more pork floss bread? Now I want to eat it the most. The last one. The tall man smiled slightly at this time. If you like it, take it away. Anyway, we have other food. I. Somehow, Tess blushed, speechless, and didn't dare to look up at the man. He. Then I'm not welcome. Surprisingly, although Tis was in the shadow, although she could not see her expression clearly, she could vaguely feel that her expression suddenly became scary, drooling and biting towards the bread. Suddenly, Tiss's eyes gradually shrank, as if realizing that she was showing that ugly state. Again, she suddenly choked, as if she was about to cry, and backed up in shame. Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. What? The man looked over and asked suspiciously. I just, actually are not what you think. I can't control myself to show my nature when I see something I like. Am I weird? Do not, the man said indifferently. What's so strange about this? Everyone has more or less his own personality. It's better to say that a person with a personality will look different. In my opinion, it's nothing. Thanks. The girl choked, tears streaming down her face. At this time, the figure of the man was firmly reflected in her eyes, as if she had seen a male god. Soon, Tis left in a hurry, and the world returned to its normal color. Yes, in the eyes of this girl, everything was filtered into the picture she wanted to see. But in fact, that guy has a brain problem, right? She inexplicably looked at a girl with horns on her head and a spiky shell on her back. She suddenly rushed up and bumped herself. then snatched the bread from her hand, and said a lot of people to listen to. Confusing words. What a strange person. Hina also silently watched the back of the blonde single ponytail girl leaving. In fact, when they first came, these murlocs gave in tacitly, and then only this girl did not leave, and said carelessly that she wanted to eat with them. Things can't be driven away no matter what, and still hold Xian's hand. Xian didn't do anything because she saw that she was a harmless girl, but because of this, she snatched the floss bread from her hands. Certainly, Xian didn't know that this girl named Tis suffered from fantasy. When she was emotionally excited, illusory perceptions easily appeared in the auditory organs. Although it does not affect normal life, it is easy to get confused about interpersonal relationships. The scene just now is actually like this. The fish people fled in all directions, making Tis nervous. Hina's shadow of Tyrannosaurus approached, causing her to fall into great fear, and the fantasy began to trigger. At this moment, Xian suddenly said, "Let her be rescued from fear." So when she turned her head, she took the initiative to regard Xian as the male god in her mind, that is, the so-called Prince Charming. Since then, no matter what Xian says or does, it has always been good for her. Even if she did something bad, she would continue to persuade herself to find a way to get Xian out. It's incredible. At the same time, Coral Hill, in the mermaid apartment. Oh, glancing at the empty shells, Irene the mermaid sighed constantly, just run away without saying a word. It's a typical pirate practice. Do you miss him? The mermaid Balian smiled lightly. How can it be? The mermaid Erin hurriedly corrected Balian's statement, denying, I'm just unhappy, as if we owe him. Well, don't be aggressive, I have heard you say it more than 100 times in these 3 days. Balian sighed as she spoke, her expression gradually becoming serious, and she said, you must forget him, otherwise, you may fall in love with him. What? The mermaid Irene immediately jumped out of the pool, concealed the spring light in front of him and pulled down the messy skirt corners, and said, but I only met him once. How could it happen? Did he do it to me? What happened? Indeed, Balian said, a charming single man can easily attract an infatuated beauty like you. But you will either forget him or bury this emotion deeply. To me, it is impossible for the two of you unless he is willing to stay for you, or you are willing to go with him, but I feel that you are useless. HMPH, I don't care. The mermaid Irene shrugged her shoulders in reply. How can I fall in love with humans, and, Balian, do you know better than me? Balian froze suddenly, she smiled for a while, and lowered her head. Sorry, although the legendary sea monster knows best how to seduce men, it's a pity that I don't. Seduce. Irene flushed her face when she heard this, and turned her head shyly. However, what is more interesting is that Balian lowered his head slightly and pretended to be coughing, but the beauty of the sea monster also blushed. I do, there is a way. After a while, Balian made a faint mosquito noise. She said, I can help you create a solitary space. As long as the siren's singing can make humans confused, he may think of you as his mind, goddess. The siren comes from ancient Greek myths and legends. In the mythology, she is portrayed as a sea monster with a human face and fish body. The crew becomes the siren's belly lunch. Siren's singing has a magical power, similar to Devil Fruit's ability, and is a strong spiritual hint. So although Balian has a voice of nature, she never sings in places where there are people, because it will cause huge chaos. What's more, Xian has not evolved the ability to effectively resist this kind of psychic hints. This is a magical attack that transcends the physical world. What can effectively resist is the impact of Conqueror's hockey. People who don't have conquerors, and those who are not steadfast in their minds, are easy to be recruited. Don't. Mermaid Irene thought for a while, and shook her head bitterly. Even if it succeeds, it's just a deception. He may not really fall in love with me, and the lie will be exposed sooner or later. I don't want to see him disappointed. Quote. Poor girl. Balian shook her head, but she was no better. Irene is nostalgic, but so is she. It turns out, if they really muster up the courage to confess, then the result will be a ruthless rejection. Maybe Xian will coldly shout, recognize your identity, mermaid. Certainly. Guessing is always guessing, and no one knows what the facts will be. Because Xian never thought that someone would like him, he always thought he was not good enough, and he didn't have the mind to think about these issues. 3 days later, the news of the Megalodon mermaid gradually began to fall, and Xian kept soaking herself in the seawater and began to suffocate herself. Finally, when he heard that the skin evolution, breathing underwater, had been unlocked, he knew that he had completed the last step and was finally ready to hunt that monster. Then, in the early morning of the next day, when the bell rang in the Fishman Island Dragon Palace, the long-lost crusade was finally about to begin. The enemy is the strongest predator who dominates the abyss, the last Megalodon mermaid in the world. The left-wing unit prepares the harpoon and hook rope, and the right-wing unit always guards the direction of the enemy. Others follow me and I will be the vanguard. If an unknown sea monster is attacked, I immediately send a signal. These deep waters can burst into high temperature and the flares of strong light are your weapons for self-help. The Murloc submersible troops were already ready and arrived at the exit of the Fishmen Island under the leadership of the old king, and Xian had already put on the armor of the Black Dragon Knight and started planning. Yes, my lord, the deep divers nodded one after another. These dull green, white belly guys have very smooth body skin, but there are scaly high ridges on their backs. Their stature has the fuzzy characteristics of a human shape, but the head is a fish, with huge, protruding eyes that never close. There are many trembling gills near the neck, and webs on long hands and feet. These Murlocs don't have the slightest sense of beauty, only cold horror. They are the guys in the Dragon Palace army who are best at deep water activities, and they can withstand high-intensity sea pressure. Very good. Xian glanced at Hina the Tyrannosaurus who was watching him, and nodded slightly. Let's go and witness the terrifying king style of Megalodon. Oh. Now that Xian takes the lead, these fish people are finally willing to go to the bottom of the horrible abyss, looking for the unknown terrifying creature, the legendary Megalodon. Open the plating. The gate has been opened, please go outside from the safe passage. Note that the seawater pressure outside is very high, you must first gradually adapt from the seawater passage inside the Fishmen Island. Set off. Xian Haki was holding the dragon spear Cadmus, and then the black dragon wings behind him shook. The sturdy figure swished out of the seawater pipeline like a deep-sea predator and arrived at the Fishmen Island. Outside waters. Wow! In an instant, the surrounding sounds became insignificant. Filled with the drowsy sound of water, Xian began to swim towards the top, and gradually began to float up under the wave of the dragon's wings. The Fishmen Island is directly under the mangrove. The roots of the mangroves transmit sunlight, making it look as bright as land, but there is no darkness. And the sea area near the outside of the Fishmen Island, those places that are not covered by tree roots, are completely dark. That is the real horror underwater world. Chapter 51. Gurulu. Xian saw it. Their hoarse, sharp guttural sounds conveyed all the dark feelings that could not be expressed in their vision. The scene in front of me. People with deep-sea phobias can instantly die on the spot, because Xian saw the darkest, deepest, and most suffocating dark place. There are unknown scary deep-sea worms in the densely packed holes. In the dark surroundings, from time to time there will be lights flickering, and when you get closer, you will see clearly the densely packed anglerfish with terrifying teeth everywhere. There are also creatures like basking sharks with several layers of teeth, as well as monsters like lampreys, deep-sea hairtails and other creatures with sharp teeth. In the true deep sea, all are ferocious carnivorous fish species. But, near the bottom of the abyss, there are fewer and fewer predators, and they are either huge monster-level predators, or some that are adapted to high pressure and strong seawater, such as whales. Biology. Certainly, if you are lucky, or bad luck, you may see Cthulhu. Precisely. It was the outline of a monster, a head with many tentacles like an octopus, a body like a jelly covered with scales, and huge claws, full of malice, as if from the dark the huge monsters in the deepest part of the world, they are the inhabitants of the abyss and the real masters of the seabed. Bring them here. The 10 pirates were confined in the bubble coating at this time, looking at the dark depths in horror, and being pulled over by several Murlocs. Step aside. Xian made the deep divers back up. Their eyes swept across the darkness, and then stared at the bottom of the abyss, and then swam down with the coated bubble holding the pirate. You are waiting here, I go down by yourself. Finished. Xian gradually dived along the seabed rock formations towards the huge gaps of dozens of kilometers towards the Rift Valley. On the way, they found many gold, pearls, gems and other things embedded in the gaps in the stones. The more, even the pirates were dumbfounded. A lot of sunken ships. I'm so panicked, it's so dark here, as if something is looking at me. Please, Master Xian, let us go. Shut up, a monster has been provoked, you die faster. Xian snorted, then swam in the direction of the shipwreck, and then extended the chain. He searched among the many wrecks, and finally found the extremely strong, giant Tyrannosaurus. Good guy, it seems that my worry is unnecessary, you are stronger than I thought. What to say, it is worthy of the scales of the big-stomach king naked fish. The scales of the legendary creature are hard enough. Xian found a huge tooth bite mark on it, but it was only scratched. This shows the bite force of the megalodon shark. Although it is strong, there is still no way to compare with the naked fish. Xian has a basic judgment on the combat effectiveness of the megalodon. Immediately afterwards, Xian wrapped one end of the chain around the head of the giant Tyrannosaurus, and then looked for other chains to continue to connect, preparing to take the ship away. Deep diver force, ready to salvage the sunken ship. Xian used the phone worm to convey the news. He put the phone worm on the bubbles worn by the deep divers. These murlocs wear diving suits to protect the phone worms and can talk. After all, hunting megalodons is only an obvious task. Xian's real purpose is to get his own boat, or else he really thinks he has spent a lot of time to kill a small shark. This is not nonsense. So the murloc troops came in handy now, and began to pull the chain with all their strength, pulling the giant ship upwards continuously. Gurulu. When Xian was assisting the fishmen to pull the boat, he suddenly heard a strange noise. He followed his vision and found a huge ship Noah. This is. Xian looked at the sinking of Noah's Ark. Compared with this behemoth, his ship was really tiny. Noah is half the size of the Fishmen Island, which was left by the human Joey Boy and the then mermaid princess Poseidon 800 years ago as an important tool to change the destiny of man and mermaid. Looking at this behemoth, only the ability of the future Van der Daken IX's target fruit can be promoted, or it is Sea King's to pull it personally. Suddenly, Xian found something strange on Noah's Ark. He couldn't help but approach the past, and saw many footprints, and some things used by humans, and all kinds of signs showed who was living here. So that's it, are you hiding here? Little shark. Xian squinted his eyes. After the giant Tyrannosaurus was pulled away, he swam around Noah's Ark, then found a small gap and got in. Aura tracking. Lock the target. Really? Xian caught the breath of Megalodon, and started to track it at this time. After swimming along the hull for nearly 10 minutes, the breath became more and more obvious, but with it, there was an astonishing smell of blood. Boom! During the capture of observation hockey, an astonishing lightning-like figure struck from the dark, opened a huge mouth from below and bit Xian's body, and then suddenly exerted force and started to shake. Go away! In almost an instant, Xian broke the megalodon's mouth, and slammed it onto Noah's boat, making a loud bang. Ha, little shark! Do you really think I can't do anything with you? Xian is not the drowning guy anymore. Whether it is power or defense, they are crushing megalodons, but what makes Xian wonder is where the bloody smell comes from. Roar! The megalodon roared with a scream, and then got into Noah's Ark without looking back, and Xian followed after seeing this. Gradually, Xian discovered that the blood was coming from the megalodon body. This guy was injured. But it was obviously not the one that Xian had just injured, but the injury that he had already had before. What kind of creature made this deep-sea monster unable to defeat it? Could it be Sea King's? With doubts, Xian tracked it up and watched the shark's tail swept by, and then dived into the corner. The megalodon didn't seem to find that it was being tracked, or that its current mind was not calm at all. Anxiety and anger, as well as hunger and tyrannical killing intent made the megalodon especially terrifying. Soon, Xian found the place where the megalodon lived, but to his surprise, it was located deep inside Noah's Ark, like a completely different world. Inside the cabin, there are many things in the human world. Tables, cabinets and beds, and even some stones and metals inscribed with words. Look carefully, there is a place where the layout is completely different from other places. It looks like a girl's bedroom. Yes, it may be unbelievable to say that Xian found the megalodon nest in the huge ship of Noah's Ark at the deepest part of the sea, and it was actually a girl's bedroom. But the thought that the megalodon is actually a mermaid girl who changed after the violent, all of this can be explained reasonably. The girl does not seem to have completely forgotten the lifestyle of the Fishmen Island because of her exile. I was born to be a human being, I'm sorry. Maybe this is what can interpret the inner words of this megalodon mermaid. Really. A road appeared in front of him. Xian slowly approached and squeezed the Cadmus dragon spear. With a sudden change, the megalodon seemed to be frightened, but before it had time to escape, Xian took his hand. His lance was thrown out abruptly, pierced through its body, and pierced into the body instantly. The great revenge has been reported, the beginning and the end. Xian seemed to be leaving the last kindness to the megalodon, ready to go over and give it the final blow. But the pain caused the megalodon to twist and struggle frantically. It bit the spear and suddenly pulled it out of its body. At this time, it fled outside in horror, seeming to realize that the monster that came to chase it was terrifying. That's right, Xian thinks the megalodon is a monster, but the megalodon thinks Xian is also a monster. So who is the real monster? Who is the real victim? This question will never be explained clearly, but from Xian's standpoint, he is not wrong in doing so. From the standpoint of the megalodon, it is not wrong. So who is wrong? The world. The smell of blood has covered the bottom of the sea. Doing so will only make you die more painful. Xian said, pulling out the dazzling eyes, and the dragon wings accelerated and started chasing upwards. Leaving Noah's Ark, Xian saw the megalodon escaping into a defective trench, and he followed and found that there was a huge pothole in front of it, like a sinkhole, and there were many weird things that made people feel scalp numb. Below the shocking scene in front of me, there were full of unknown creatures, like octopus and squid, attached to the rock wall motionless, as if disguising themselves, until the megalodon intruded. It caused a huge sensation. The megalodon was also hunting them frantically. Gradually, Xian found that the serious injury he caused to the megalodon was slowly healed. As the megalodon eats faster and faster, its injuries are recovering faster and faster. This self-healing ability is amazing. Xian looked at the megalodon greedily, thinking that how to eat this guy might evolve a powerful talent. Roar! The megalodon roared and glared at Xian, eyes full of terrifying killing intent, but it seemed to be very afraid of the lance in Xian's hand and did not dare to approach it. But it was in the process of stalemate between the two sides. At the bottom of the abyss, a dark figure was gradually wriggling, twisted and trembling, with a nightmare body, terrifying to the extreme, and a huge and terrifying life form composed of darkness appeared. What? A huge arm and foot that was stronger than a megalodon stretched out, and what was terrifying was that there were extremely sharp barbs and dense suckers all over it, red as blood, and it looked extraordinarily oozing. Legendary monster. In an instant, Xian recognized the identity of this monster. Like the big stomach king naked fish, it is an extremely terrifying monster. It is only possible to hunt down if its own body is doing its best, and this is the case now. Let alone hunted, once caught, it is very likely to face the danger of being crushed. Because that tentacle already had a mass of thousands of tons, the ghost knew how big the monster's body was, and at this time Xian saw three huge and terrifying dark green eyes appearing in the abyss rift, staring gloomily. The huge monster just stretched out an arm and foot and stirred the seawater around the megalodon to boil, and the surrounding seawater was twisted and turbulent in an instant. Withdraw. Xian swam backward without hesitation, and started to swim towards the middle of the huge rift valley on the side. At the same time, he found that the megalodon was also coming here desperately, just behind him. Then, a chase battle began. A giant squid-like sea king over 5,000 meters stretched out his arms and feet to chase a megalodon shark about 40 meters, and this megalodon shark was chasing a figure, that is Xian. Disappear. The moment Xian turned around, a terrifying black-red energy was condensed from the palm of his hand, and it clung to the direction of the megalodon for an instant, hitting that huge arm and foot. Boom. The terrifying high temperature coupled with the lethal restraint of the decomposition of flesh and blood, the huge arms and legs began to gradually collapse, but because the range was too small, it only penetrated a palm-sized hole. For sea kings of this size, it's like being stabbed by a needle. Although it tingles, it doesn't hurt. Cut. The blood is so thick. Xian knows that this kind of creature's defense power is not strong, but its blood is thick and durable, and the black dragon's breath can be compared to real damage, but the blood line is extremely high, so it can't be less than the slashing line. If it is a hit, there is still a little hope. But the key is that this monster with the characteristics of octopus and squid, who knows its weaknesses, and how many hearts or brains does it have? After all, a monster with tentacles and one brain also exists. Have you followed? Looking at the megalodon, Xian ignored it, because the only threat to him was the sea kings. Soon, he arrived at a place that looked like Atlantis and also like Lely. He passed through the huge stone pillars, and what he saw was a submarine space made up of silt, wetlands, and huge moss-grown rocks. This kind of stone is somewhat similar to the material of the historical text and looks like an ancient relic. It may be the building when the Fishmen Island opened up wasteland 800 years ago, but now it is covered by gloomy, fluorescent and unknown marine plants. Xian advances through the unpredictable edges and corners of those buildings and swims towards this hidden, sinister and anxious places. The moment you came in, Xian began to push the huge stones and began to seal the ruins, and when the tentacles suddenly collided and swept across, the terrified megalodon got in, and Xian also completely blocked the stone gate. At the same time, he folded his hands in front of him and leaned firmly behind the stone gate. No matter how the creatures outside collided, he seemed to be unable to break this pinhole-sized stone gate because it was too small for it. 100,000 tons. 200,000 tons. When Xian stubbornly lowered the stone gate, he calculated in his heart that the force generated when the tentacle hits has reached a staggering 200,000 tons, but it seems to be far more than that. Xian's strongest physics department big move, the Great Extinction Dragon Emperor Wushwang, is only close to the million-ton level, and it is extremely injured. It needs to use high-speed dive to strike, and after one move, it will fall into a weak state. Usually, the impact force of the tentacle monster is far inferior to the strength of the strangulation. Coupled with the 5,000-meter level tonnage, Xian guesses that the weight of this monster is about 2.8 million tons, which is nearly 100 times his weight. Name: Yuandi Kun King Big Squid Chapter. Level: Legend. Race: Sea Kings. Weight: 10,000 tons. Maximum arm and foot length: 7,980 meters. Hunting suggestion: 7th level Dragon King form or above. Alright, through the suggestions given by the system, Xian gave up the idea of dying with it now. The octopus was actually idle and bored. After seeing Xian and the megalodon run away, he returned to his place without interest. After all, chasing down one or two trivial tiny creatures is a waste of energy, and it's not worth it. At the same time, in the palace of the underwater ruins, in the huge hall, a human-eating megalodon and Xian in the form of a black dragon armor coexist in the same room. Bubbles are constantly rising from under the twisted floor soaked in seawater, which looks very strange. Little shark, stay and make my dinner. As soon as Xian finished speaking, the megalodon fled to a deeper place without looking back. Can you run away? Xian followed, and gradually began to explore this place. Gradually I learned its name, Lost Ancient City Luotian City. In layman's terms, this is Lalai, which is known as the place of Cthulhu, but Cthulhu in Pirate World may be just the one just now. The Big Octopus, and this Loyang City, is one of the few relics left by the glorious human history that was submerged by the sea many years ago. Explore mission: find the undersea heritage. Target: the treasure of Loyang City. The system will also temporarily release some tasks to refresh the sense of existence. Xian was also surprised by this, but the undersea heritage aroused his interest. Whose legacy is it, Cthulhu's legacy? Or the legacy of ancient civilizations? What are these heritages? With this question, Xian broke into this strange ancient temple. He saw numerous murals depicting the octopus on the surrounding walls. It probably described a terrifying sea monster that attacked a ship a long time ago. With huge arms and legs and the power to crush sailboats, countless people were killed. However, the octopus on the mural is obviously only a few hundred meters huge, not as huge as it is now, but considering that it is a sea king's, it will definitely evolve. Maybe it has lived for thousands of years to grow to what it is now. Wait, what is this? Xian saw a mural with a humanoid creature with an octopus head. This is to Cthulhu. Soon he found other notes, which probably indicated a meaning, that is, the humanoid creature with the octopus head is actually an experimental body, a creature made by a group of scientists for animal experiments, but it failed, and the octopus man quickly exploded. NS. There were many other experiments, and then Xian discovered an evolutionary map. It was a pattern of a hairy mammal, which was mixed with a human gene, and then humans became orcs. Later, the orcs went wild because of the moon, their hairs quickly became luxuriant, their size was huge, and their fighting power was superb. Looking at the evolution of these mammalian humanoids, Xian thought of a possibility. Is this a fur clan? A guy who can become a moon lion in the legend. Speaking of, Xian found that the fur clan's madness is exactly the same as the change in the evil medicine that Horty Jones took in the original book. The evil medicine increases combat power by about 10 times, but it accelerates aging. Both of the eyes are bloodshot and red, and the white hair keeps getting longer. It's just that Horty Jones is overdrawn, while the fur clan loses his mind and is gradually crazy. The origin of blood, or wild instinct. With that said, the megalodon seems to have a way to return to a normal human form. Xian thought of this, and began to search the surrounding ruins rooms. He kept rummaging in the stone container, looking for all research and the like, things. There must be. Where is it? Laboratory. Since the murals of biological genetic engineering are depicted here, it shows that this place was once an experimental base for biological research, so maybe there will be some residual medicines, or how to make medicines. Whether it is Horty Jones's killer drug, the secret treasure of the Fishmen Island, or the man-made devil fruit in the fur family, it may be related to the lineage factor of devil fruit. This is what Xian is looking for now. There are many ancient written records here. Xian couldn't understand, but he came to a cold room with amazing intuition. In the metal-covered cold room, there are many blue liquid glass tubes containing unknown liquids. Xian cautiously took out a bottle of liquid material, not knowing whether it was a virus or something, so I sampled and analyzed it first. Sample analysis. System prompt. You got a bio-sedative potion. Name. Biological sedatives. Used in conjunction with bio-enhanced agents to reduce damage to cells. So that's it. Xian understands that the killer drugs, the national treasures of the Fishmen Island, are all for strengthening the physique, but the side effects are too great and they need to be used with sedatives to alleviate the impact on the cells. But in the end, the guys at the Fishmen Island only took away the strengthening part, but ignored the medicine. Good things, take away all. Xian moved all the contents of the cold storage directly. At this time, looking at the megalodon who was still evasive in the distance, he suddenly had an idea. Does sedatives have any effect on blood-raging creatures? Do not know, but if you try it, it's not impossible. At this time, Xian looked at the megalodon and decisively used Conqueror's Hockey to make a direct impact on the soul. For a moment, the megalodon's body tightened, and then it was distorting the air. Conqueror's shock gradually showed horror, but did not faint. Do not move. Xian took advantage of the megalodon's carelessness and threw the tranquilizer into its mouth. As the cracked glass was shattered, the megalodon swallowed the potion. No response. Maybe it was not time. After waiting for a while, when Xian thought it was invalid, the megalodon's eyes slowly hollowed out and gradually lost focus. Immediately afterwards, as if asleep, the megalodon crashed to the ground and lay motionless. Seeing this, Xian frowned slightly and approached. I don't know if it's dazzled. The megalodon's size began to shrink, like a twitch, and its size began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye as the muscles vibrated. The serrated shark man Arlong in the original book can make his body parts huge or transform into the shape of a weapon. These are actually a kind of Murloc's ability to change the body. And now, because the megalodon had fallen asleep in the past, it finally began to return to its original form after a long absence. Soon, a lowly girl with the same pale silver hair as Bai Lian, a pointed nose, and shark teeth was sleeping on the floor, which looked very cute at first glance. Except for the shark fins on her elbows and the raised fins on the back, the overall look is similar to humans. The lower body looks like a shark tail like a magi, without scales, but grayish-white skin. The body length is about 3 or 4 meters. Xian measured her weight. It was more than 2 tons. The muscles are very elastic, and the body density and bone structure are much larger than ordinary people. Although she is curious how she can become giant teeth sharks, but considering that there are so many things in the world, Xian will not have so many problems. This guy, it's interesting. Xian looked at the megalodon mermaid named Carol. Is this her true face, the true face of a deep-sea demon who was excluded from the world? Decided, Xian directly resisted her on his shoulders and walked towards the deepest part of the ruins. As he walked, he said, "No matter what you have done before, you will be my navigator in the future. A combat power with both swimming and ancient species. Perfect creature, nothing is more suitable than this." Finished, he smiled wickedly, licked the corner of his mouth, and said, "If one day the ship is killed, you can go to the sea to catch fish, and there will be no shortage of food in the future." Navigator. It's better to be a chef. The key is that she is still emergency food, and it is really out of control in the future, then she can only eat a big shark meal with tears. Just kidding. What Xian fancy is her ability. If she is not a pirate, but a monster on the bottom of the sea, it would be a pity. While walking, Xian came to the deepest treasure room, and a giant door appeared in front of him, as if saying, "Please show me your pass." Then, with a bang, Xian violently opened the door and broke in, ruthlessly searching everything, and finally focused all of his attention on a golden box. This is. When the box was opened, a ray of light appeared in the eyes of Xian was a fruit with a weird pattern, devil fruit from the depths of the ocean. Zone. At first glance, Xian exclaimed the type of this fruit, but I don't know what form it is, and the information about it is unknown. Boom. Because of Xian's violent intrusion, the agency here was triggered. So he didn't have time to think. He took devil fruit and a lot of inheritance directly, carrying the Meiji lowly girl, and ran towards the outside. Fortunately, Xian had been trained and had first-class escape skills, so he quickly left the cave. The secret room arrived in the submarine rift area. Chirp. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Suddenly, when he arrived at Xian near Noah's Ark, he found that the megalodon girl lying on his shoulder seemed to have awakened from a deep sleep, and made a tender sound of eating pain. Wow, ah, ah. Then there was a scream, or that she was sorely carried on her shoulder. She was really taken aback. "Hey, stop calling." Xian put the package on Noah's boat, and then unloaded the struggling girl from her shoulders. You, who you are?" Maggie Lowly opened her mouth wide at this time and looked at Xian in disbelief. She has sharp shark teeth. After a long time, she feels a little cute. Of course, the premise is that she can't smell the blood. Forgot me so soon. Xian slowly pulled out the terrifying dragon spear from behind, emitting a faint terrifying light in the sea water, and the sharp tip hit Lowly's heart at this time, and the opponent was immediately frightened in cold sweat. No, Meiji Lowly seemed to recognize that this was a terrifying weapon that almost wore herself through her heart just now. Looking at the sharp point of the spear, she felt a pang of angina. "Quick, change it for me." Xian yelled coldly. "Change? What?" Meiji Lowly looked up blankly. "Become a megalodon. Today I am going to stew your shark fin in a pot, grill the meat, boil the big bones into soup, and host a feast in the village to entertain everyone in the Fishmen Island." Woo. Lowly, who seemed to be frightened and stupefied, had tears in her eyes, and the surrounding sea began to twist. She was so scared at the time that she really thought she was going to be killed. "No, I can't change, I can't control myself, don't eat me. I am really not tasty, thin and small. Skinny, you didn't think so when you attacked me. Have you forgotten the hapless guy who was attacked by you not long ago?" Xian grabbed Meiji Lowly by the neck, pulled her to her, and looked at her condescendingly. "Now there are two choices before you. First, I will make you a full fish feast. Second, I will make you a fish feast. You will be my person from now on. I captured you, so it's only me who decides whether to release or raise the animals, you understand?" "Aha." Meiji Lowly nodded vigorously, then raised her head slightly in fear and asked, "Do you care?" "Tube. Is it full?" Lowly's eyes lit up. "It doesn't matter if you are full." Xian knew that the megalodon's appetite might not be much smaller than her, so she didn't agree to this condition. Woo. Meiji Lowly suddenly felt wronged, and Xian soon explained, "But if I eat, there will be you. How about this?" "All right." Meiji Lowly nodded weakly at this time. "But, what do you want me to do?" "I want you to be a pirate. Tell me, how much do you know about sailing?" "Huh." Shaji Lowly tilted his head, seeming a little puzzled. "What is navigation?" "It's how to find the right direction in the ocean and go to the next place. If you can't, you will have to go to the back for future meals." The position of the navigator in the pirate group is quite high. But if you don't understand it at all, it's a waste. Just when Shien didn't have much expectations, Majiloli smiled suddenly, opened her shark teeth and smiled. It's impossible. No one understands ocean current fluctuations better than me. No matter how dangerous and complicated the deep sea is, I dare to go, and I know their structure well. I don't doubt this. Shien was also very curious. This guy actually dared to go to the terrifying Sea King's site for food, indicating that she has enough courage, wisdom, and rich experience. But, can I? Pirate or something, it sounds so far away. Majiloli suddenly lost his confidence, and said with some sadness. Do you mean that you will be violent because you smelled blood and asked? Don't worry, if you become a megalodon, you don't have to worry about hurting other people. Instead, you should be careful not to yourself. Battered all over. Shien squatted down at this time, inspecting the wounds of Majiloli's body, and gently stroking the smooth skin. Even if it is restored to a human shape, sometimes there is no way to heal itself in a short period of time. You will not be allowed to become a shark without my order in the future. But, no, as if to comfort her, Shien took out the sedative medicine. This thing is the power to restore you to the original. Even if you really can't control yourself, I will let you fall asleep and wake up. Everything will be better then. Really, really. Facing the innocent side of Majiloli, Shien nodded. Wow, so happy. Majiloli girl jumped up like a child with joy, swam around Shien a few times, and couldn't stop happily. See this scene. Shien thinks that this guy is actually what people call a demon who cannibalizes without blinking. It is incredible, but don't look at Majiloli now is very cute, but she is essentially a megalodon mermaid, a blood-sensitive violent beast. Normal as a lowly girl with shark teeth, innocent and lovely, but if she smells the smell of blood, she will become extremely violent, and she will kill everything desperately. The more she fights, the more hungry she will eventually become. Eat up all surrounding creatures that can be not until he is hungry and fainted. Majiloli's human form and megalodon form are two completely opposite personalities, just like the opposite of angels and demons. However, due to the extremely developed sense organs of sharks, Majiloli is also very familiar with ocean currents, has a particularly keen perception, and often appears in dangerous and complex deep-sea environments, and has a special understanding of the structure of the sea. A keen sense of smell and amazing senses give her the ability of a super navigator. When chasing enemies, she can also track for thousands of miles. At the same time, she has an amazing talent for memory, and she will never forget the map she has seen. If Nami has a good grasp of the climate, then Loli Carol is very sensitive to ocean currents, and is more suitable for sailing in dangerous and unusual seas, as well as changes in temperature and humidity. The true navigator must be the overlord of the ocean. False navigator, fleeing with a weather stick all day long. Shien lacks talents like Carol. He is well behaved and obedient, mainly because he is cheating. And it's easy to feed, and it doesn't cost money. For example, other navigators may have a lot of shit, but Carol is different, just give it to food, not picky eaters at all. But to be honest, it really gives people a chance to choose. Few people choose Carol as a navigator because she is too unstable. Blood rage is like a time bomb. If there is no overwhelming power, it is difficult to control a bloodthirsty and frenzied megalodon, and during a big sea battle, there are bloody and dead people everywhere. In this case, what's the matter? The answer is, simple cannot be simpler. Shien made a cool gas mask on the spot and put it on Carol's face. She can't smell the blood, it doesn't mean she can't see it, so a mask solves all the problems. Clever. This is really not an idea that most people can think of, but it is precisely this way that Shien can harvest a lot of excellent crew that other people rush to avoid. Although every crew member on his ship will be full of personality, in the future, it is precisely because of Shien's personal charm that all these predators who can't beat them all gather in one boat. Boss, where are we going? Majiloli. Carol soon took herself into the role of a pirate. At this time, wearing a cyclops-like blindfold, showing sharp teeth, she giggled, "Let's go kill." I said you are thinking about something in your head. We are going to the Fishmen Island, I have to take you over for business. Shien interrupted Carol's self-directed and self-acting, and said that there is no need to dress up so strangely. The Fishmen Island. Gradually, Loli lost her smile, and Carol stopped where she was and did not move forward. The corners of her mouth curled downwards and her eyes looked elsewhere. I don't want to go. Are you so afraid of them? I'm not afraid, Loli angrily retorted. I just don't want to see them. I hate murlocs. I hate mermaids. I hate everyone. All right, Xian nodded and said casually. I won't force you to do things you don't like, it's up to you. Loli looked at Xian with bright eyes, as if she felt that the boss was really kind to her. Carol is a poor guy, because he will be violent when he smells blood, turning into a terrible megalodon, hungry forever, never filling his stomach, so it is especially dangerous. Several murlocs have been persecuted, so they have been expelled and are not allowed to approach the Fishmen Island. But Xian went on to say at this time, you cannot go to the Fishmen Island, but if someone wants to see you, don't you see? Who is it? Loli tilted her head, her eyes filled with doubts. Bai Lian, your sister. Xian's words made Loli silent, her eyes flickering, and she said, they won't let me see her, the guys from the Fishmen Island. It's different now, Xian said. You are the navigator of the Xian pirates, not the deep sea demon. No one will make irresponsible remarks to you. If so, I will make them regret being born. But, don't worry, I will protect you. If anyone dares to speak ill of you, I will screw off his head and no one can hurt my crew. This is the only rule of the Xian pirates. But what if doing so will make you an enemy of the Fishmen Island? Loli still asked in disbelief. Little guy, who do you think I am? Let alone the Fishmen Island, even if it is an enemy of the world. A mere murloc, don't think that you can beat me in strength. Aha, hearing what Xian said, Loli's eyes almost lit up. She only felt that her newly recognized boss was so cool and good hockey. At the same time, the thief had a sense of security, and she was no longer afraid of the Fishmen Island. Carol, tell me, go to the Fishmen Island of TM, Lousy is a pirate. Go to the Fishmen Island of TM, my old lady is a pirate. When the innocent girl shouted such arrogant words in the lowly voice of her young teeth, she also followed Xian and laughed. Follow me. Xian put his hand in front of her. Upon seeing this, Carol grabbed it, and the two held hands to swim on the bottom of the sea. It didn't look like a relationship between superiors and superiors at all, but more like friends. In the dark world of Carol, the first light of dawn also ushered in at this moment, as if the sun was shining into his heart, very warm. The legendary deep-sea demon, bloodthirsty and horror, tireless, always hungry, and at the same time extremely violent, wild awakening, blood returning to the ancestors. That snow-white and ferocious posture, people call it, Megalodon Mermaid. Feared by others, cast aside by others, forgotten by others. The demon being expelled, sleeping in the bottom of the sea, no one cares will. Until one day, a black dragon and another female dragon came here suddenly, so the hungry megalodon exposed the instinct to kill and attack them. But because of this, he angered the black dragon and made the dragon feel extremely angry. Soon, the dragon's anger spread to the deepest part of the seabed, and everything will be burned and destroyed. Under the crush of fear and absolute power, the megalodon fled away from home and hid in the bottom of the abyss. The dragon chased it, only to find that what they were facing was a more powerful and distorted shadow monster, which looked like eyes from the abyss, huge and frightening. The offensive of the abyssal giant Squidjong was unstoppable, causing the dragon and the megalodon to temporarily retreat to the ruins. But they underestimated the swift and violent offensive of the Abyss Master, and at the most critical juncture, when the megalodon was about to be chased and fell into despair, it was the dragon who helped her. The most anxious and fearful, she was helped when she was most helpless, even though both sides were enemies in terms of position. Hey, I'm very angry. Are you ready to bear my anger? The dragon said so, frightening the shark. However, I can forgive everything you have done to me, but relatively, you have to use your whole life to repay it. Long did not kill her, but gave her a glimmer of hope and promised to raise her. The shark was scared, so he agreed. Gradually, the shark realized that this dragon was not so indifferent and ruthless, but treated her as a real person. It was an unprecedented feeling. The girl who has lived in hell since she was a child has never tasted the happiness of living. She has spent every day in pain and danger. She has been praying for death, but survival is so strange to her. Sea monsters, demons, white sharks. They called themselves by various names. In the long years and despair and humiliation, she never gave up the true meaning of life. Because there is nothing, there is no point to lose. And one day in the future, someone asked, "What the hell is he to you?" And she replied without hesitation, "My light has resisted the dark light." This man. Maggie Lowly Carol's eyes flickered, and she looked deeply at Xian's profile. This man who gave her hope became everything to her almost at this moment. This tall and mighty man, like a archy vine, transported sunlight to the bottom of the sea at a depth of 10,000 meters, and took her out of the abyss, giving her hope. All of this is what Xian is lying to her, then she is estimated to be Blacken's thoroughness, grief and despair, and become a monster forever. But fortunately, Xian didn't lie to her, but really treated her as a navigator. Therefore, Xian gave her hope, and she will dedicate everything to this person and contribute all her strength to him. Until many years later, the young and beautiful Carol will always look like Xian's right and left arms. Just as reliable. That's all. Xian took Carol back all the way back to the area outside Noah's Ark. Here, Xian found the rags of the pirates he used as bait, and there were some iron chains spit out around them, as if they had been bitten by something. A bunch of hapless guys, originally planned to let you go back. It seemed that the slave traders and pirates had been eaten by something. Xian shook his head. Anyway, he didn't intend to let them leave alive to continue harming others. This bite mark. Carol looked at the broken teeth on the chains in surprise, and suddenly recognized, it's that guy, the demon whale king of the deep sea. Whale, good name Hockey. Xian looked at Carol curiously, and her expression was very angry. That whale always robs me for territory, and often brings other sea kings to grab my food. It doesn't sound like a good thing. But the infamous megalodon is more cruel than the whale, but now that Carol is his own crew member, Xian will definitely blame the whale. Sniff, there is a smell of blood, Carol said suddenly. At this time Xian looked at her small white face. Under her pale silver hair, her eyes began to congestion at a speed visible to the naked eye and turned red. This reaction is too fast. Seeing Carol's signs of madness, Xian was a little stunned. I don't even smell the blood, at least it's coming from several nautical miles away. No, it doesn't matter, I can't bear it. The direction of the smell of blood is southeast, about 5,410 meters away. Can still be accurately positioned. Xian was surprised. This tracking ability is too bug, no wonder the nose is so good. Carol's voice became smaller and smaller, her breathing began to become quicker, and her heart beating faster than before. Come on, put on this. Seeing her uncomfortable look, Xian took out the emergency bubble for life-saving. This bubble is usually compressed in the bottle as a resin, and can quickly expand at a critical moment. As long as Carol wears it, it can shield the surrounding bloody smell. What a fun thing. Carol didn't expect Xian to have this kind of exquisite thing. After all, the future Van der Dekenix is the key to swimming under the sea with this trick, and it is also the reason why Paramesha can use the ability to target the fruit. Sudden, my G. Loli's pointed ears moved, and she said, there is a call for help, it's a murloc. Oh, Xian also gradually heard the shouts at this time, and suddenly woke up, it's the deep diver unit. The fish people have been attacked. He barely saw a glimmer of light disappearing far away. It was a signal flare, indicating that the large unit was being attacked by an unknown creature at this time. Hurry up. Xian took Loli's hand and started to swim faster, swimming in the direction where the murloc was killed. Ah, hurry up, they are in a nearby reef. My hand is broken. A strong smell of blood rushed over his face. Xian saw a large group of dark shadows besieging the fish people. After looking carefully, he found that many ancient deep-sea piranhas were hunting, and they started attacking like crazy. That is, Carol also saw the tragic picture of piranhas besieging the murlocs, feeling very cruel, and said sadly, could it be that I was like this when I became a megalodon? Well, almost. Don't you remember? No, I only remember some one-sided memories, but when I attacked, I didn't have any impression. It seemed that the body was instinctively controlled, including avoiding attacks. Sounds like predatory instinct. Xian also has similar abilities, so it's not surprising, just like the more he gets injured, the stronger his attack power will be. In the most violent times, Xian almost doesn't even recognize himself. Whenever a major event is done, Xian will have the illusion, I was so fierce. Aren't you going to save them? They died immediately. Maggie lowly stared at the ancient piranha school with stern eyes. At this time, the old king was also surrounded by it, all wounded, while Carol stared at him like an ordinary murloc, without any emotion. What are the weaknesses of piranhas? They have no weakness. Carol shook his head and said, unless all the individuals are killed, they will not stop preying. A large-scale attack, Xian understood at this time. He stepped forward, closed his eyes, and began to concentrate the energy and attention in his body, as if the time and space around him had slowed down. At the moment Xian opened his eyes completely, an astonishing red light burst out from the pupils, and an extremely powerful force came from him. This power that materialized like a physical attack was extremely powerful. It was terrifying and palpitating. Everything around you felt this chilling power, as if the sea was dyed blood red, and the surroundings turned into hell. All creatures had their eyes widened at this moment, and cold sweat was flowing. Long way. As Xian took a step, his red eyes revealed killing intent and strong will. He targeted the area of the ancient piranha school and issued a dragon roar. Get out! Get out of here! Hurry up! Foods! Only the real top predators can challenge me. Sea kings! A more terrifying coercion came violently like a tsunami, and the fish people even paralyzed in place, most of them passed out in a coma. This deterrence approached the soul and was full of kingly qualifications. Chi. The ancient piranhas were naturally unable to resist this pressure. They showed a humane expression of horror. They mistakenly regarded Xian as the overlord sea kings, and fled one after another. Some even fainted with their belly upturned. Son. Okay, so awesome. Mai Ji lowly covered her mouth, looked at Xian in admiration, and said excitedly, what did you do just now? I have never seen this kind of ability. A look scared away those piranhas who are not afraid of death. This wave is because of me. Let's hang it. Lowly tilted her head and expressed puzzlement. The legendary person who has the qualifications of the king of conquerors hockey among millions of people, ordinary creatures cannot withstand this deterrence. That's it. It turns out that the boss is such a great person. Mai Ji lowly doesn't know much, but in short, it's awesome. Master Xian, you are finally back. The survivors of the Murlocs showed the expressions of the rest of their lives. Fortunately, Xian arrived in time. At the same time, they all looked curiously at the evasive mermaid girl behind him. She is. The old king looked over and seemed to be a little puzzled, but didn't recognize that this was her daughter, the mermaid princess Mai Ji Carol. Come here, Carol, Xian said, beckoning to the girl behind him, but the other party seemed to refuse to see these people, and the old king also understood it instantly, with regret and self-blame in his eyes. Carol, my child. The old king wanted to come forward to hug her, but Xian cruelly pinched his arm as soon as he stretched out his hand. Master Xian. The old king looked at Xian who was blocking him in amazement. At this moment, even if he appeared taller in front of the other party, he felt a unique sense of oppression at this moment. She is my navigator now, and it has nothing to do with you. Moreover, you have expelled her from the Fishmen Island a long time ago, so it has nothing to do with the Fishmen Island. When you touch her, you are provoking me. The captain. Xian turned his head slightly to look at the old king, and he was stunned for a while before nodding his head and retracting his hand. Forgive me, child. No, now it should be said that you are a member of the Xian pirate group. From now on, you can come to the Fishmen Island, not as a mermaid, but as a pirate. The old king also understood that Xian did this to protect her, and he has no regrets, and is not qualified to give advice. Instead, he is relieved that Carol can find a good home, at least he can. I'm dead at ease. My daughter will ask you, Master Xian. She is not your daughter anymore. Oh, the old king sighed and stopped discussing the issue at this time. He said, your ship has been salvaged, and now you can go back. I will tell you, the Megalodon was crusaded, and since then, there is only one Carol, who is a pirate, and there is no such thing as a deep-sea demon anymore. Very good. Xian nodded. At this moment, Carol, who was hiding behind him, kept her head down. The shadow covered her eyes, making it difficult to see what her expression was. But from the slightly raised corners of her mouth and the tears confused with the sea, it can be seen that she has abandoned her past identity, and since then, she has been reborn. Everyone returns. Take the wounded away. Remember to tell everyone that the devil is dead, and the winner will live forever. Having said that, the deep divers looked at each other and nodded one after another. They didn't want to live in fear anymore. The Megalodon incident was over and it was a happy ending. That's all. When everyone else left, Xian looked at Carol, who was only about his waist tall. After looking at each other for a while, Xian smiled and said, "Come on, Carol, I'll take you to meet other people." Mr. Xian. Carol did not move, but raised her tearful delicate face, cried and hugged it up. Thank you for everything you have done for me. No, you should be grateful to your sister. She has worked tirelessly to bother me every night and beg me not to kill you. Now it seems that your sisters have one thing in common, that is too easy believe in others. I am not a good person. Xian smiled like a dragon while talking, and Carol grinned, showing sharp white teeth. This is a team made up of carnivores. Compared with those vegetarians, they are more likely to express their true inner feelings and more easily emotional. But under the violent temper of all the wicked people, everyone has more or less gentleness that ordinary people can't understand. The Fishmen Island, a parting place. The bonfire was burning, the sizzling fish was fried on the iron plate, the oil was poured, and the spices were sprinkled, giving out an extremely attractive fragrance. On the opposite side of the grilled fish iron plate, Xian sat on the bench, holding the shell fan and starting to fan the fire, and at the same time was responsible for turning these dozens of big fish over. Behind him, the eyes of two drooling creatures shined. He looked here, almost submerging the ground. So, brother, why did you bring this weird guy here? Isn't it enough for you to have my sister? Hina expressed her thoughts very dissatisfied, and yelled, very sad, looking at this side sourly. I'm a navigator. Now the status of the pirate group is not lower than you. Do you know how dangerous a ship without a navigator is in the sea? So, whether you like me or not, the boss of Xian is mine. Roar. Hina roared suddenly. He, Xiaolonglong, do you want to fight? As a megalodon, Carol has superior combat effectiveness, surpassing Hina in an instant, becoming the second war force second only to Xian, and fighting in the sea is even more invincible. On land I am not afraid of you. Although Hina is very afraid of being attacked in the sea, this is the land she is closest to, so she is not afraid of a small area of marine life. You seem to have forgotten something. I am a mermaid. I am also capable of fighting on land. Carol smiled with a dark belly, showing a row of sharp teeth, squinting his eyes slightly, and the redness of his eyes met the deterrence of natural predators. Megalodon in the sea, terrestrial Tyrannosaurus. These two top predators met together, so it's strange if they don't fight. But, Xian said, you can fight as you please. It doesn't matter if anyone is injured. Just don't kill. However, you have to think clearly. If you fight now, these grilled fish will run into my stomach. In a word, two ferocious predators squatted in place like cats docilely in an instant zero. Yeah, not far away came a figure. A few mermaid ladies came over a little shyly, and then panicked, putting baskets full of fruits and desserts on the ground. Just first quit, this is a little bit of our thoughts. After speaking, the mermaid ladies put down their things and ran away, hiding behind the wall and peeking over here. Oh, thanks. Xian recognized those mermaids who had been rescued by him, and now they delivered meals to themselves, as a way of expressing gratitude. But, when he was going to get something, he suddenly saw a figure covering the sun, slightly raised his head, saw a pair of white feet and long legs, and then saw a familiar figure appear in front of him. They are very shy, don't you think, Xian? Sea monster Balian came over at this time, and at the same time smiled slightly at the mermaid Irene, who was a little twitched behind him, blinked, and motioned her to come forward. Who are you? Xian raised her head to look at the mermaid Irene, her expression gradually solidified, then the corners of her mouth trembled and her eyes curled, as if she was about to cry. She's Irene, the one who took you to save me. Sea monster Bai Lian hurriedly explained. She couldn't help but spit out in her heart, God, how could you even forget this? Just kidding, of course I know her. Xian hurriedly said that he almost didn't recognize it just now because he didn't look at the girl carefully at that time. Now it seems, Irene has wavy light blonde hair, blue eyes, and pearl hair accessories. She is a beauty, and her personality is biased towards introversion. According to speculations in this era, she may be related to the future Princess Otahime, and may be an aunt, because the blonde hair is a typical member of the mermaid aristocracy, and most of the ordinary mermaid are green and other colors. Pink and gold are considered more noble. Carol, the sea monster Balian, gave Irene the opportunity to speak alone, and then hugged her sister. She had met with Carol several times before, and everything that should be said was said, and now it is the last one. Want to get together with her before leaving. At this time, Irene's eyes flickered, and she looked at Xian like her first confession. Well, will you still come to the Fishmen Island? Should be. Xian thought for a while. He might stay in New World for a few years. But it is inevitable that you will return to the Grand Line or the east, west, north and south to find the rare devil fruit and other treasures. Although he is not interested in the title of One Piece, the process of the big voyage adventure is still very interesting. After all, you never know what will happen next second. Quote. Yes, Irene smiled bitterly, because she didn't have the courage to say whether she could stay or not, but looked forward. Do you have anything else? They are waiting for me. Xian pointed to Hina Tyrannosaurus and Carlos Megalodon, who were waiting to eat, and said that it was difficult for him to raise two foodies. No, nothing. Irene sighed, decided to keep her thoughts, and blessed them silently. Okay then. Xian nodded, picked up some presents and desserts on the floor, and suddenly said when he left, "Oh, yes, you are very beautiful today. You seem to be dressed up specially. It should be to meet some important person. Don't make him wait too eagerly. NS. Thanks." He still noticed that Irene wanted to cry, but couldn't help it. This is the difference between the treatment of the heroine and the supporting actress. Mr. Xian, wait. Irene suddenly yelled to him, crying, and said, I must come back next time. I want to hear your adventure story at sea again. Surely next time. Xian showed a row of white teeth and turned around with a smile. Gradually, his expression calmed down, as if he was aware of what Irene wanted to say, but he did not give this opportunity because the distance between the two parties was too far. If he had to accept every girl who likes Xian, then what else would go out to sea? Just go home and have a baby. If he had just come to this world, he would not refuse. But now, he is no longer alone. He is a captain and needs to be responsible for the entire team. Eileen, she is actually a very bold person. The sea monster Bai Lian smiled and walked over, watching Irene crying and running away, as if she knew the result. So you arranged it. Xian looked at her very uncomfortably, and seemed to feel that this woman was getting more and more cunning than he had imagined, which made him dislike it very much. You guessed it, Bai Lian said. If I don't do this, she won't forget you, but don't worry, she is not the only mermaid girl who likes you, there is a ready-made one in front of you. Are you talking about yourself? Haha, Bai Lian smiled without saying a word. She said, or you can take me away, I just stayed enough for the Fishmen Island. I heard that you are recruiting some special talented crew members, even though the combat effectiveness is almost zero. I am quite confident about singing and fascination. There is a singer on the boat. It is good to be used to activate the atmosphere. Think about it, cunning guy, break down his competitor's mentality, and then do it yourself. Forget it, no kidding, you are actually Carol, right? I was found out by you. They weren't worried about their sister because they were afraid that you would cheat her away and then bully her. Although I am very sorry to Irene, I only need to apologize afterwards. Obviously, Bai Lian did everything for Carol. Although she had a good impression of Xian, she hadn't reached the point of trust, and she was more like a friend. Don't worry, she won't be wronged, at least you think Hina is very fond of her, otherwise she won't quarrel at every turn. Among Xian, everyone has a distinct personality. The first one, the pirate captain, Xian, on the giant Tyrannosaurus, he is thoughtful and intelligent, with both a brain and a warrior. However, under the transformation of the dragon form, the combat IQ has been greatly improved, but the overall situation is considered. The considerations will become weaker. After entering the violent state, the brain hardly thinks much. It has only one purpose, and that is to completely tear up the enemy in front of you. The second place is Tyrannosaurus Rex. Xena, a quirky little guy with a high combat IQ but inexperienced in doing things. She likes to imitate her brother Xian and perform pranks, both from her moves and behavior. I can see the shadow of Xian and rely on him in particular. The third place is lowly. Carol, a contrasting cute guy, innocent in human form, but sometimes has a black belly. But the megalodon, Carol, is completely a monster, and his reason is negative. Under the blood-raging state, the megalodon's ferocity and violence will be interpreted to ultimate. Because of Carol's special situation, there will be a contrast between the two personalities. Usually, the Magi girl is used to describe the human form, and the frenzied form is described by the megalodon queen. The woman in front of Xian called Balian, whose race is the Siren, can be described as clever, or rather cunning. I have to admit that her brain and emotional intelligence are very high. With the appearance of heaven-defying, and the voice of heaven-defying, as a siren, she is also divided into two types, good and evil. The good siren is charming and graceful, the evil siren is deadly and cunning. In terms of thinking ability alone, her mind is above Xian, but she doesn't know how to hide herself. She is a type that prefers kindness and is usually not malicious to other people. What's more, if Bai Lian is a bad woman, she will lead a ship to destruction, the ship will be destroyed, and no one will be spared. She is the messenger of the legendary ecstasy and the guide of the underworld. And if Bai Lian is a good woman, she will be particularly inspiring and uplifting, and her sweet singing will lead the team in a better direction. The Fishmen Island is not without reason to fear the sea monster siren. It is usually regarded as a taboo for such people and a symbol of disaster. It's like people in the Middle Ages regarded witches as servants of the devil, and they were usually burned to death by fire, and witches were divided into good and bad, and so did the siren. The ones that can really bring destruction to the Fishmen Island are the ferocious, wild, troubled fish people, and they are the ones who really like to make trouble. But, is Balian good or bad? For a while, Xian's expression changed, and he said with a little thought and fear, "You fellow, didn't you plan all this when I first stepped into the Fishmen Island, right? The purpose is, let me redeem your sister." Mr. Xian, you can really laugh. Bai Lian showed a charming smile, and there was no change on the beautiful face, making it hard to tell if she was pretending or whether it was true or false. I'm not kidding, no matter if you pretend to be like this or it is true. Anyway, your sister is in my hands. Since you care about her so much, you should definitely try to get her back from me, but unfortunately, I am very skilled. One chip. Xian took out a sedative from the package and said, "This is the antidote specifically for violent violence. Only if she is by my side is the safest thing. You'd better rest assured. Since you have said so, then I have no choice but to do it." Bai Lian's expression gradually changed from a gentle smile to a cold, facial expression controlled well, as if this cold and arrogant temperament is the real her. "Mr. Xian, I did use your emotions, but you can rest assured, I have no malice towards you and your people. Carol is a very innocent child. I only hope that she will not be wronged by you. Now that you have seen everything through, then I have to give up. In addition, please accept this as compensation. It was left to me by my mother. It is said to be a holy artifact of the Kraken clan." System prompt. You got Thesaren's pendant. Xian took the blue drop-shaped necklace, which looked like a tear, and its attribute value was also very special. Item. Kraken's pendant. Effect. Immune to mind control, improve mental concentration, observation hockey. Description. A very rare object, according to legend, made of tears shed by the princess of Siren when she died. Humph. Xian put away the pendant and raised the corners of her mouth and said, "For the sake of a good thing, I won't care about you." Sure enough, the more beautiful a woman is, the more cunning. I will have to keep an eye on it in the future. Quote. Then you have to take care of it. With that said, Bai Lian returned to her original gentle smile again, and quietly approached Xian, clinging to her ears to whisper the Kraken. The hero is sad for the beauty level, and be careful to make the 10,000 years ship. Sometimes women are very good at disguising on the surface. Yes, this is the way for women to survive. Bai Lian's words seemed intentional or unintentional, but they also reminded Xian that people can't just look at the surface. But, so far, Xian has not figured out when Bai Lian began to hint to herself. Maybe she had been spotted as early as when she met her and awoke from lying on her lap. Sister Balian, Captain Shien. Suddenly, Carol ran up aggrievedly, pointing to a Tyrannosaurus Rex behind him, and said, "Look at it, Hina has taken my food away, let her go." The innocent Xiao Yuji interrupted the inner game between the man and the woman, making the situation easier at this time. "Hina is still young, you can let her." Bai Lian comforted him at this time, and said to Carol, "You can't be too stingy to be a sister." "Huh," Carol blinked and said, "Is Hina younger than me? If you count from birth to now, Hina is only 6 years old this year, but she said otherwise in the age of Tyrannosaurus Rex." This. Carol seemed to froze a bit, curled her lips, bit her lip, and decided to bear with him, just treat her as a younger sister. "By the way, how old are you?" "My, 22. Carol grinned and said a number that stunned Shien. The innocent young girl in front of me is actually over 20 years old." Shocked to death Shien. Carol is a megalodon mermaid, this age is considered sub-adult. Bai Lian smiled lightly, while Shien looked at her curiously, and said, "How old are you now? I can't say that you are also bullying a minor." I won't tell you." Bai Lian resolutely refused to report his age, because she is much older than Carol. "If you infer, the old king looks white-haired Madara. The first time he fell in love with Bai Lian's mother was in his 20s. When I was young, that is to say, it has probably been decades since Bai Lian was born. The future Mrs. Xiarli, the shark mermaid fortune teller, is Bai Lian's disciple." Thinking carefully, she is terrified, but she can't realize her age at all. As a creature in mythology, Siren has been beautiful and extraordinary throughout her life, so Balian refused to tell her age for fear of destroying many people. Fantasy. So Bai Lian's age became a mystery, and Xian didn't know how old she was until many years later. "Mr. Xian, it shouldn't be too big." "Oh, I won't tell you either." Xian can't say that he is only about 10 years old now, this is too scary. "Well, forget it. The question of age is meaningless, because you are not humans. It's really better than lifespan. You are still the Sea King's first. For living things, the larger the size, the longer the life expectancy. Legend has it that there is a long-lived giant tortoise, which is bigger than the island, lived for nearly 10,000 years, and witnessed the changes of one era after another." Everyone. Xian looked in the direction of the giant Tyrannosaurus at this time. He said, "Our pirate flag should also be hung. Have you thought about what pattern you want?" Roar. Tyrannosaurus. Shark. Horned skeleton. Suddenly a strange sound rang from the crowd, and the others followed their sights. Their eyes were instantly attracted by the two objects, and a beautiful woman with a plump body and a single blonde ponytail appeared nearby. "Who are you?" The three of them complained in unison, and this guy who appeared suddenly looked a bit familiar. "Ah, it's you." Xian recognized that this girl was the strange guy she met a few days ago, robbed her of her bread, and said she was a good guy with horns on his head and a spiked carapace on his back. "It's Tis." The blonde single ponytail girl patted her hard at this time and blinked her eyes and said, "I'm here to apply, aren't you recruiting crew members?" "Apply for a crew. Will you fight?" "No." Tis shook her head, but she said, "But I have a lot of strength to lift a boat." "Oh, can you cook?" "No." Tis shook her head again, saying, "I like to eat, and I have a lot of appetite." "Okay, you can go." Xian waved her hand and motioned to her to leave quickly, and said, "I can't cook or fight." "What will you do? Do you repair the ship?" "Yes, I'm here to apply for a boatman. My family is a boatman for generations to come." Tai said excitedly, and said that she was very good at repairing and transforming ships. Seriously, Xian and the others showed suspicion, but Bai Lian was slightly surprised, and looked over at this moment. "Tis, are you that Tom's sister?" "Who is Tom?" the others asked. "You don't even know Tom, the world's first recognized boatman, right? He is very famous in the Fishmen Island." Hear, hear. Xian remembered that Tom was the one who built the boat for Roger, and his sister shouldn't be much worse, not to mention that they all have similar horns, indicating that they are indeed ancestral. "Don't look at me like this, my ancestors are very powerful. The nose arc built by the legendary mermaid princess is a design plan originally planned by my ancestors." Quote. Tai said proudly, as if it was all her credit. The designer of Noah. I have to say that Xian was shocked by her words. Is this so powerful? So he asked. Then can you remodel my ship? No problem. Talking. Tis followed Xian's gaze, then her expression froze, her gaze gradually solidified, she blinked, and then cold sweat on her forehead. Xian looked at Tis, who was stunned, and suddenly questioned, what's the matter? Tell me about your renovation plan. Tis didn't expect that this huge hockey ship was Xian's ship, and she was shocked. She actually didn't know shipbuilding, but Tis was particularly good at refurbishing and modifying ships. Even if it is modification and transformation, it is only for those ordinary small, medium or large ships. And now before her eyes is a giant battleship. Originally I wanted to say something like, excuse me, goodbye, but at this time, both Shiji and Tyrannosaurus Rex gathered around, as if saying that if you don't give an explanation, you won't be able to eat Kabuto and go. In this intense state of being noticed, Tissa's eyes became confused as if she had eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms, and her fantasy was triggered, and she began to talk incoherently. Of course I can. Do not believe it. As Tis said, she hurriedly took out a scroll from her heart, not knowing how she stuffed it in. After all, after spreading out the design drawings, she began to paint indiscriminately, just change the flank of the ship to a streamlined shape. It can greatly improve the acceleration ability. At the same time, the fancy and complicated head and tail can be further modified to maintain a stable main body, from the subjective image of a Tyrannosaurus to the appearance of a giant dragon, and at the same time, the position of the naval gun can be made on the ship. Left and right each wing has 10 cannons and a main ship cannon. The meticulous decoration and space folding application in the ship must be measured by yourself. In short, it is probably like this. When Tis finished speaking, she shivered. Xian and the others looked at each other and looked at Hina. Is it feasible? It's feasible. Hina also nodded without understanding. I don't understand, it seems very powerful. Carol was shocked at this time and said, you are really good. Although I didn't understand a word, I always feel very powerful. Okay, then you. Xian doesn't understand, but it doesn't matter. No matter how bad he is a well-known boatman. He will always become more proficient. From now on, you will be a new crew member. My name is Xian. How do I call you? Tis. The blonde and single ponytail beauty stared at the front blankly. Just now she just said casually, these people actually believed it. Hey, I said you guys. Bai Lian was holding her face at this moment, saying that it's really okay for you people to get together and go out to sea. What do you mean? Do you understand? I don't understand either. Bai Lian was speechless, shaking her head with a wry smile. Don't pretend to be a master if you don't understand, right, Tis? Xian smiled and patted her on the shoulder, and then smiled kindly. If you dare to lie to us, others will treat you well. Woohoo. Tis now began to regret it, looking at the sharp teeth and claws of the Tyrannosaurus and Megalodon, and she felt that she still had time to run. It's a pity it's too late. Because she has been pulled into the team by Xian as a crew member, it seems that she can't run away. That's all. A black dragon captain who likes to single out a group of people on the opposite side, an eccentric Tyrannosaurus deputy captain, a Megalodon navigator who has never learned sailing, and a naive and silly person who doesn't know much about shipbuilding but is very good at transforming. The thorny dragon tortoise beautiful boatman, and 4 guys who are completely irresponsible for their positions formed a pirate group. Start sailing. On the skull banner of the pirate ship, a pair of flying dragon wings are painted, while the dragon's skull looks like roaring and spitting flames. It looks very oppressive, symbolizing the meaning of pioneers in the world. Facing the grand line that few people have ever set foot in, they are here. And set off in the direction of New World. At the same time. On the grand line, the Rumba pirate ship. Captain Madara. Brooke rushed in with a newspaper excitedly. It's the Xian pirates. They went to the Fishmen Island, and Mr. Xian has now been promoted to 300 million bounty. Really, Brooke? The whole group showed happy expressions. In the eyes of these pirates, the bounty was a symbol of pirates' honor. Xian's going to sea as a pirate was seen by them, and now in just a few months, the bounty has risen to such a high level, which makes people feel proud. Guys, want to celebrate? Go get the wine and bless Mr. Xian. Haha, come and have a good time, watch me get down on all of you. Captain Madara Biao took a sip of wine, then laughed and said, "Is anyone going to challenge me? Come on, who is afraid of whom?" The pirates all laughed, raised the wine glasses in their hands, and toasted one after another. Looking at this picture, Brooke also smiled slightly, showing a relaxed expression, and started drinking together. As the night got darker, Brooke stayed alone in the room, wiping the violin, sighed deeply, and muttered, "Mr. Xian, you are much better than all of us. I look forward to your presence." The moment when New World reached the top. Brooke, who was wiping the violin while reminiscing the scene when he first met Xian, smiled and gradually fell asleep because of sleepiness. I do not know how long it has been. Brooke heard the sound of killing shouts from outside the door, and the metal bang of weapons, and he was awakened instantly, holding the sword beside him, pushing the door open, and rushing to the vicinity of the deck. What happened? The storm was mixed with blood and alcohol. At this time, a man covered in blood was standing on the deck. It was Captain Madara Biao. He turned his head slowly, his lips trembled slightly, and his eyes were full of pain and hatred. Puff! Captain Madara Biao vomited blood, looked at Brooke in despair, knelt forward, and squatted on the ground. "Captain Madara Biao, what's the matter with you?" Brooke rushed up tearfully, and saw the pirate on the side shouting with all his strength, "Brooke! Don't come here. But the captain needs treatment. Don't shout. They are still alive." The pirate coughed up blood in pain, and it was very difficult to speak at this time. Storm. The plague pirates took advantage of the storm to hit us. Captain Madara Biao repelled them, but they were also infected. "Brooke, hurry up. You must. Live. Asshole. Stop talking. Watch out for your wounds. You idiot." With tears in his eyes, Brooke burst into tears. "Blame me, if I wake up sooner. Hey, don't bother, even you can't stop their sneak attack." Captain Madara Biao was lying in a pool of blood and heavy rain. At this time, he said with a sad expression, "The pirate will die. I've already had my consciousness." "What are you talking about, the kings? Didn't you say you are going to New World? How can you fall here?" "Brooke, I still want to listen to you playing the piano, sing." Hearing this, Brooke thumped to his knees and watched the eyes gradually lose the light. Captain Madara Biao, tears could not stop dripping down the rain. Finally, let's play another song." Brooke took out his violin and hummed the Rumba Pirate's favorite pirate song. In the melody of Bink's Wine, the ship drifted away and entered the Sea of the Devil's Triangle until Brooke's consciousness became more and more groggy. At the time, he finally fell overwhelmed. At this point, the Rumba pirate group was attacked by the Plague Pirate Remnant Party, and they all destroyed and roared. However, since the death was in the waters of the Devil's Triangle, the news did not spread for a long time. So when Xian knew about this, a long time had passed. At that time, Brooke had already turned into a bone, and crawled out of hell, became a skeleton swordsman, encountered Gecko Moria, and has not left this sea until many years later. 2 months later, in the second half of the Grand Line, a town on a New World island that cannot join the world government because of poverty, cannot afford the heavenly gold, and cannot join the non-participating countries of the world government island. After the country's demise, more and more children become unfortunate orphans, many of whom are one of them. Boom 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 boom. Ah, die, go and die. The gunshots were endless, and the pirates laughed wildly, but the bullets were blocked by a burly and tall man like a dragon. They didn't seem to hurt or itchy, making the expressions on the pirates' faces change. More ferocious. "Go away, I'll kill him." Standing in front of the man was a pirate with sharp eyes. At this moment, his fist became extremely dark, and his figure disappeared into the same place, jumping high, and punching the man's chin suddenly. "Is it that way?" Seeing the fist hit, the man raised a hand expressionlessly, blocking the opponent's fierce offensive. "What?" After being blocked, the pirate's eyes changed instantly, and at the same time he took a step back and smiled. "It seems that you are also a guy who knows hockey. In that case, brothers, let's go together. Come on all." Facing the pirates who were besieging him, the man grinned open his mouth, clenched a fist with one hand, and instantly squeezed out the air from his fingers, full of power. "Go to hell." The pirates rushed up, and were blown away in an instant. Before he could be shocked, his vision suddenly changed. A terrifying sense of crisis struck. The cold hair stands upright, the pores shrink, and the heart beats violently in an instant. It seemed that there was a big, powerful hand squeezing their hearts, with suffocation, pain, and fear. Roar! The power is liberated. A pair of huge dragon wings that cover the sky and the sun suddenly stretched out with a bang, releasing a wide range of wind pressure and roaring, and suddenly an ultimate coercion dissipated. Amid the terrifying vibrations, a huge shadow appeared in the billowing smoke and dust. In a blink of an eye, a terrifying black dragon appeared in front of them, and a huge horn full of deterrence rose into the sky, muscles all over the body, emitting a deeper red blood. He is that Black Dragon Xian. Despair struck, the man had not had time to finish, blood spurted out suddenly, the whole person was thrown into the air by the dragon's claws together with the sand, the earth was torn apart, and flew into the sky in the violent mud waves. Too much talk. Even the most basic investigative opponent's intelligence is not understood, and the pirates who dare to call themselves New World are really laymen. The most important thing is that Xian has warned them like this, not realizing what they are facing. What? The ordinary people and pirates who were watching showed terrified expressions on their faces, while some people had long expected it, and all of them showed enthusiasm. As a pirate, Xian himself is an unruly person, no one dared to provoke him with a questioning tone. He does things right and wrong, and it depends on Xian. People who look upset are killed directly, without hesitation, and extremely decisive. Charge Dragon Claw. The black dragon stood tall and raised his right paw to accumulate energy. Before the second person could react, as the right paw slammed into the ground, the terrifying black thorns of the forearm added a splash effect, together with gravel and violent dust. The ground with a radius of tens of meters was smashed fiercely, causing a huge pit-like collapse in the movement of the earth and the mountains. What a terrifying power! However, such a cruel method shocked everyone present in an instant. From the conflict of time to the end of the battle, the whole process took only a few minutes. When everyone reacted, the group of pirates who provoked the Black Dragon was already bloody. Crazy. Fear. At this moment, let alone those ordinary bounty hunters and pirates, even some of the small and famous New World guys can't help but feel cold inside. This guy is simply irritable and violent coon. That blow was too shocking for others, even if it wasn't for him, he could still witness the feeling of death by his side. It was creepy. A single claw alone caused extensive terrain damage. This is to the extent that many demon fruit powers may not be able to do it, not to mention the purely physical attacks he uses. Absolutely. Power. A tall and thin pirate who witnessed the whole process raised his mouth at this time. The cause of the incident was that a group of pirates were drinking in the tavern, and then angered the man because of their impertinence, causing the tavern to be smashed, so there was something in front of him. In one scene, no one thought that this tall and mighty man had such terrifying power. For those with the ability of the dragon-type demons, it seems that New World is about to add another king. As he said, the tall and thin pirate stood up. His actions surprised everyone around him. He slowly walked towards the black dragon, wearing a long sword around his waist, and his mouth raised high. "They're dead, my dear John, make a friend." Roar. Suddenly, the terrifying Long Tong suddenly turned his head, staring straight at the tiny human being, and let out a roar that made the atmosphere tremble. Without hesitation, he threw a punch and ruthlessly smashed the tall and thin pirate and the house under him. Fragment. Don't be so angry, just say hello. The tall and thin pirate leaping high, stepped on the dragon's arm and ran upwards, flipped 3 times in the sky, suddenly pulled out the long sword from his waist, and cut out a few dozens of meters of huge sword energy, tearing the ground around the black dragon apart, while the sword aura fell on the scales of the dragon with a loud sound. It seemed that the slash that could cut through the rocks and the ground had no effect on it. Pirate, you don't know anything about power. The black dragon showed a cruel smile, raised his neck, swallowing a metal object into its belly as if swallowing something, and in an instant, its body exuded a dazzling metallic luster, and turned into a giant dragon in the form of a steel dragon. At this time, the tail flick swept across a large area, and in the earth-shaking eruption, the islands under his feet split like a spider web in all directions. Yeah, it's a big game. The man who claimed to be John scratched his head at this time, and the moment his feet fell on the ground, he stepped on him suddenly, bursting out at a terrifying speed, charging forward tens of meters, and then slammed the blade in his hand forward to slash a lot of sword energy. Tearing the sky. The speed is extremely fast. It seems that it is the ultra-fast attack speed unique to the dual sword flow. Dozens of knives in a second slashed on the metal defensive dragon scales, and a terrible fire broke out. The shining silver scales are full of toughness and strength, and their resistance to swords and other metal weapons is plus 200%. However, the resistance to thunder and water properties is reduced. Swordsman. Hum ha 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 ha. Xian, with a steel scale skin attached, let out an arrogant chuckle at this time. He has a hand to fight the swordsman. He first tightens his waist and accumulates his strength, and then one wing sticks to the ground to predict the enemy's position, and then slides abruptly. Crash, interrupt the enemy's movements with the posture of Iron Mountain leaning. Flap the wings again to release the strong wind pressure to disturb the swordsman's posture against the enemy. Take advantage of the instability, use the front paws to make a fast frontal strike. No one will resist this move. Most swordsmen will involuntarily move towards retreat, and for the Black Dragon Xian, this distance is close at hand. Its attack speed may not be as flexible as a swordsman, but its range is extremely large. Under such a fierce continuous attack, even a great swordsman cannot hold it. Have to avoid the edge temporarily. Therefore, is there time to escape? Muscles burst out bleeding. The furious black dragon charged sideways, and its left paw tore the ground. It began to run quickly, and the left paw inserted into the ground drew a terrifying fire all the way, dragging its body forward, and retreating at the tall and thin swordsman. At that time, he turned and lifted, and was lifted into the air along with the target and a lot of mud. So cruel. Jian Haojian was frightened and suddenly felt scared. He had never thought that this black dragon was not only an explosion of power, but also that the combat experience and skills were top-notch, especially the action of predicting the position and making moves in advance. It's like, you used observation hockey to predict your attack, I used observation hockey to predict your attack. He, Captain John, bounty of 790 million berry, a member of Rock's Pirate, a famous big pirate. At this time, he was crushed and beaten by a black dragon. I had known that he shouldn't have come out to pretend to be forced by this time. But after all, as a big pirate, John gritted his teeth and exploded with amazing reaction power in the air, in Xian Dragon Claws. The moment I took the shot, I jumped towards a high place, stepping on the falling rocks and rising step by step. Dragon Wing Raid. The big wing behind the black dragon slapped, leaping up into the sky, instantly reaching a height of several hundred meters, surpassing Captain John, and looking down at him condescendingly. Smash it! Just when Xian was about to fall from the sky at the speed of sound, Captain John shouted, I give up. Don't fight. Do you think I will stop? I think you should be. Captain John retreated at this time and said, I heard about your deeds, I am here to find you to cooperate. Say. Xian stopped, and the guy in front of him was far different from the ordinary pirates, but it was worth understanding. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.